open the May 2nd meeting of the new Board of Aldermen workshop session. Mr. Stevens, if you'd like to go over that letter of support for the garden.
Yes, sir, Mayor.
Just make sure that we show for the record that everybody's in attendance for this meeting as we start this new meeting. I was in attendance for the other one.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mayor, members of the board. One matter of business that we added to the agenda, amended, and that we needed to get taken care of real quickly, or get an idea of what the board's thoughts are. Last year, in the application process, Love A. Wallace Singleton approached us for an opportunity to her to seek a 2017 Farmers Market promotion program through a USDA loan, and she is applying for another one this year. In doing so, the letter of support is necessary for her to submit for the application and utilization of some of the Volt Center property. And we did get an okay on that last time, so I signed and executed a letter for her stating that she would be able to utilize that property. There's a copy of last year's, I'm sorry, there's not a copy of last year's, but there's a copy of this year's letter. Both of them is 2018.
This our package has it.
Oh, does it? Okay. Both of them are 2018? Oh. No, both of them are 2018.
The very last page.
There it is. There you go. So the very last page, I'm sorry, I thought it was in there, but I couldn't find it. The last page actually shows the letter that was approved last year for me to execute and send to her for usage in this application process. It's essentially the same letter in form as last year's, just kind of to hit the high points. There would be a 3-year usage of the property that's consistent with the award period should she get the grant. And at the time, if awarded, we would establish a lease agreement with the city and the Veterans Employment Base Camp and Organic Garden, which is Love A. Wallace Singleton's organization. This basically proposes the utilization of property to expand the Eastern North Carolina Farmers Market footprint with the opening of a Farmers Market and Agricultural Training Center that's consistent with the kitchen area that we were planning to improve that's on the Volt Center property. We call it the Volt Center as a whole, but the Volt Center property, that's kind of where the electric services operations staff utilized during their time whenever they operated from there. Myself, Jeffrey J. are here to answer any questions that you may have regarding it, but ultimately she has an application deadline of, what was that, May the 8th? May 8th. So while we do have a board meeting that day, we wanted to get it here so that she could get it submitted early, because my understanding is it's a very competitive process, and timeliness getting it early is important.
Mark, would they be like teaching how to grow an organic garden, and are they going to have other people there selling?
I think it's an opportunity to where for this veterans organization, they're the ones they grow the vegetables down at Stanley White, adjacent to Stanley White Recreation Center on some property that's city owned. I forget the name of the street that it's on. Do you know?
Main Street.
Is it Main Street?
Yeah.
They currently have their operations based there. What this provides is an opportunity for them to prep the food as well as potentially sell the food at this particular Volt Center project. And Jeff, you got anything to add?
Sure, I'll add a little bit to what the city manager said. We've been partnering with LeVay and her group for the past 3 to 4 years, probably 4 years. It started with a request for us from her to Thurman Hardison, the Parks and Rec director at the time, to utilize some of our lower kind of flood-prone property that we had over at the Stanley White Park complex to start this program with her. So she just began it very recently, and where she takes veterans and teaches them essentially the organic garden. So they're gardening, they're growing vegetables at her place there. This is a kind of logical evolution of the project to give those veterans the training. It's from how it's been explained to me is now they have the food. They'll learn how to prepare the food, how to cook the food. Most importantly is really how to learn learn how to operate in a commercial kitchen type setting, how to stay clean, how to prepare food, how to package food, and then later on, the final stage is the kind of entrepreneurial aspect is own and operate a business selling food. So it's a program that'll take a veteran right through learning how to cultivate and grow organic produce, all the way through to how to harvest it, prepare it, cook it, package it, sell it.
So they would be selling prepared
Correct.
food, not tomatoes, bulk tomatoes and stuff like that?
Could be doing that too.
Yeah.
And would it be just this veterans group,
Yes.
or would there be other vendors there selling? I just don't want to create another farmer's market. I mean, if it's just this veterans group, then I'm not so sure I'd have a problem with it. But I'm not so sure if we want to have another farmer's market group. I mean, we got a nice farmer's market here.
That's full.
It is
Pardon me?
not
That's
full.
full.
It is not full.
It is full. I can provide you documentation for people who have called and asked for booth and they're told no.
Are they farmers?
No.
Okay, if they're not farmers, it is full. A farmer, I'm on that board, a farmer has the first right to go in there. So anybody who has fruits, vegetables, that's a farmer that wants to sell, somebody else would get knocked off. But a farmer has first right. I'm on that board, I can show you the bylaws that says that.
I guess peaches, reselling peaches, is that not considered a farmer?
Is it their own, that they grow them? And see, that's the difference. We just don't want people to go on the side of the road or go to the grocery store and pick up, boxes of peaches and come in there and sell it as farmer's market, do that. But a farmer who is growing their own vegetables, that's what their bylaws, if you look at their bylaws, that's what they say.
Mark.
Sorry, go ahead. I just have 2.5 questions. The first one was, didn't you apply for a grant for us to do like the city market?
Correct.
Okay, so that will still be, we're still trying to do that aspect over there
Yes,
where
ma'am.
people can have booths and stuff. Okay, then the other question I had was, wasn't something brought to the board previous for an individual to get a farmer's market and it was turned down? I think her name was Dawn Gibson. I just want to know the story behind that and why we want to say yes to this and no to any other individual.
Sure. There were certain pieces of property in which that individual requested, the organization requested. One of them was near the Frog Pond, adjacent to our police department property. We were not necessarily interested at the time in selling that for potential future expansions of our police department if it was ever needed, being that that's our main station.
Right.
And because of some of the property and evidence issues that we also have to maintain. The other piece of property that they inquired about, and actually, to be honest with you, we offered them the opportunity of this particular property, which they weren't interested in.
Okay.
And they looked at the Third Avenue projects, where the property that we had on the left side, once we did the realignment.
Right.
But at that time, we had not subdivided all of that property out per what our requirements were. The DOT had not turned over their section at the very beginning where the realignment was done, but that now has happened. The properties were not yet completely subdivided. If you go actually look at the aerial photos versus the property photos in the Craven County GIS, they don't align necessarily, so that still needs to be done. And then also we had sections of that property in which we were looking at the over $8+ million worth of 81 senior housing,
Right.
low-income housing
Right.
units that was getting ready to go up. So we didn't want to necessarily commit to that because we knew that project was coming down the pipeline. So
Okay.
that's kind of the history.
And the half question would be, if this was to be approved, it could necessarily be an extension of the farmer's market? Because they'll be able to,
I'm not sure what you mean
any,
farmer's market. like
so
one
the
we have
farmer's market
downtown?
that's downtown,
No, this is a
it would be,
totally separate program altogether, 100%.
so no, will any, but like how they do the farmer's market, will I, say if I had a booth and I wanted to sell purses, is it just specifically for food, or will I be able to get a booth to do?
Where, at City Market?
Okay, city market,
Well, I'm
not,
not sure what your question is, right?
So-
Is your question is later on down the line when the Volt Center City Market project is completed, will there be space available to someone to sell purses? Is that what your question is?
No, the farmer's market program that LeVay wants to do.
No.
It's just specifically for.
What I described
Okay.
earlier, essentially.
Veterans, the
Veterans.
program where they grow the food
Yeah.
and then educating them on the processes to take the cultivation of the food that they have. Once they've grown it, now they've got all this food, what do we do with
Right,
it? So
right.
it takes them through an educational process and training process to go from the cultivation to selling it.
Okay, gotcha.
And it's a job skills program as much as it is a program on teaching them how to, build the food, grow the food, prepare the food, sell the food. But it's also how to work in a commercial kitchen.
You want to know the honest opinion? It would be our hopes that the program is so successful that it takes an unemployed veteran off the street, teaches them how to grow food, trains them on how to cultivate it, and actually move to where they can actually sell them commercially, own a piece of property, maybe even grow their own stuff, and then start their own business.
Right.
That's
So,
the plan.
not trying to be ignorant, what's something that they would make, like, that they would sell? Am I allowed to ask that question? Like, if we got to the end result at the market, what would be, like, what?
Like
Cucumbers.
canned corn or something.
Salsa, I don't know. I mean,
Salsa.
they're
Oh, okay,
commercially
okay.
making,
Honey.
so they grow all their different herbs
Got
and
you.
spices, so they want to create salsa.
Okay.
And,
Oh,
and
that's different.
you may have answered my question or not, but I'm not sure if I heard you directly or correctly. Will other people be able to go there and rent a space and sell their tomatoes and cucumbers and stuff like that?
That has been the goal of the city
I
market
just
since
asked
day
that.
one.
I know, but I still didn't hear him. Say that again?
That has been the goal of the project since we began it 2.5 years ago.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, because the location of it was
Location is
potentially,
perfect.
yeah, serve the citizens over in the Duffield Five Points area. I mean, I think that would be a great location for that. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's great. Because downtown, you're saying the farmer's market is basically for farmers. So this center would accommodate individuals, like even myself, to come there and sell some produce or
Well,
whatever. if I
you
want to.
you can still do it, but you either have to grow it or make it.
Right, okay.
That's their
At the
thing.
farmer's market.
Correct.
Yeah.
Jeff, let me ask you a question. Are you aware of the Catalyst Kitchen?
Yes.
Okay. So right now, the effort is put forward. We are in the process, many of us in this community, working with Corey Purdy for the Catalyst Kitchen. The Catalyst Kitchen takes unemployed people down on their luck, trains them, just what you're talking
Same thing.
about here.
Correct.
Why are we competing?
When there's no competition.
How is this no competition? Why
Because
aren't we
there's plenty of
working
spec-
together?
Because we have veterans on one program, and we have unemployed or
Well, many
people
of the
with records in
veterans are
another program.
unemployed
There's
as well, but why don't we gather that? Because if they're going to put the funds into creating this kitchen, they've already got the space, they've got the funds, why aren't we working together
We are working together. Just met with them today with the community college.
with Catalyst Kitchen?
Correct.
So then why couldn't they, instead of getting this grant to go towards the Catalyst Kitchen, working together and let that be the site where they're training people, since that's what we're going to be doing anyway? We'd have two almost competing places.
Well, again, you use the word competing. There is no
Okay.
competition. There's plenty of time and there's plenty of space for both groups to work together to provide services to different segments of the society.
But the Catalyst Kitchen would be right there in the Five Points. That's where it's going to be located, right there in the Five Points neighborhood. That would be the community they're trying to serve.
Sure.
So I'm not sure. I'm concerned we have duplicated in many ways. We have a current farmer's market. I would have loved to have seen her work with our current farmer's market to get this to expand there. That's the way I feel. And here's the Catalyst Kitchen. So we've got these programs already
Absolutely.
working. Why don't we try to get the funds to bolster these in both places versus
We are.
creating one more new thing?
Again, I probably just have to disagree. I think we are working with both, and there's plenty of opportunity for both to be very successful in what they do.
So with the Catalyst Kitchen, that would be, you're saying, within the Five Points area?
Yeah, it's right
And
there,
then-
Corey's.
Right,
building.
okay. And then the Vault Center, that would be actually
Well,
through Craven Community College?
The Catalyst Kitchen, there's the
Eastern
space
Community.
is still, we don't know where it could be in the Volt Center. So, sure, there's plenty of opportunity to work together. It's not the pie isn't finite, it's abundant. I think the more services we provide to different segments of our society, of our community at risk, to give them the jobs, training, and the skills they need to succeed, I think we can't do wrong. And we have some excellent partners in the community. Corey Purdy, LeVay, wonderful people doing wonderful work. There's no competition. We are all working together,
So
and
with-
it's very successful.
So with the Vote Center, that's basically through Craven Community College, correct?
The Volt Center workforce training portion of it, yes,
Okay.
correct.
So then those individuals would have to actually pay a fee, correct? For those, utilizing those programs?
Yes.
And so with the Capitalist Kitchen, as she say, in the 5 Points area, is that Alderman Banger through grant programs? So that would be through grant programs?
I'm not, we're still working
Okay.
on the details on what that is.
Yeah, what it would do is Catalyst Kitchen is, you'd be given a job,
Okay.
and you would be taught how to cook and prepare food, and then the kitchen becomes a restaurant, a local
Okay.
restaurant that people would go eat at, and they would make their money to train and pay these individuals through their restaurant.
Okay. So
So
these
it's a
individuals
workforce.
that's going through this training process
Would
and
be
everything
free.
would be free? Okay.
Correct. And they would get paid
Okay.
as well.
Jeff, you recommend this?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments about this?
I do.
Yes.
The old farmer's market on George Street, is that still open and still running? I understand that there's
No.
2 people that normally goes out there on Saturdays and sell collards and sweet potatoes. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of, but, are you aware?
I'm not aware.
I'm not aware of
Okay.
that.
They have been sitting out in the parking lot.
Yeah.
If they
Yeah.
do that, they do it on their own accord.
Because I think that building now, or at least the majority of that building now belongs to
Soup
Habitat
Kitchen.
or something.
Soup
Soup
Kitchen.
Kitchen.
Well, you can probably see a lot of people setting up all over town, basically, in some areas, selling products and stuff, because there's no more privilege license, so they're really not, having to pay a fee
Sure.
for it, so.
Part of the idea for the
we
campus of
have
the city
1 or
market
10
was to capture some of those folks, those vendors that are
Right.
on the side of the roads, selling
Okay.
their sweet potatoes, and give them a place, a centralized place, where
Right.
people can get
Exactly.
used to that location, instead of driving around town saying, oh, wow, you know what, let me go buy some sweet
Yeah.
potatoes. Like, oh, I'm gonna go down to City Market and buy some sweet potatoes and spend some time there,
And then we
On-
wouldn't have them all over our streets as well.
True.
Okay, at this time, unless there's any other questions or comments, all in favor of this item, letter of support? Beg pardon?
No, I thought you were gonna, there was gonna be, have to be a motion.
Yeah, we would need a motion if the board so entertains that.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we endorse the letter of support for Veterans Employment Base Camp and Organic Gardens grant applications for the 2018 Farmers Market Promotion Program and 2018 Local Food Promotion Program.
Second.
Does everybody understand the motion? Show of hands, all in favor of that motion.
For the veterans.
Those against, the same.
Me?
And Madam Clerk, the Alderman Harris not being here is a yes?
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Stevens, what do we have at this time, sir?
All right, so we'll move into the next phase of our discussion of the budget, and all of this will be associated, excuse me, with our main enterprise funds. We've already discussed one of them with stormwater, but water fund, sewer fund, and electric fund. We have Jordan here to present these to you, and myself, and we're happy to answer any kind of questions as we go along the process the board wishes to ask. We're going to start with the water fund, and that begins on page 171 in your budget book.
Question. If you are out of town and you don't use your water at all, and you come back and your bill is the same as when you left, it's like you use the water, but you didn't use water. Can you explain that to me?
Yes, sir, Alderman McKenzie. Our water and sewer rates have a 2-part component. You have a readiness to serve charge, so a cost to basically have the water there to your door ready to use. And then we have a consumption component based on how much you use. So there is a flat fee no matter how much water you use. So if you're gone for the month and you use absolutely no water, there's still a minimum water and sewer bill that will come to you. And that's essentially, like I say, our readiness to serve, what it costs to have the infrastructure ready at your door ready to get that water to you. We do have a service, though, if you're going to be going out of country for 6 months or away from your house for an extended period of time, we can cut that water off completely, so you're not getting that minimum monthly bill. And then there's just a reconnect, a simple reconnect fee. You pay one time, we'll come back out there and turn everything back on. We see a lot of folks do that with their irrigation meters. In the winter months, they'll cut them off. So October, they'll cut the irrigation meters off. They stay off all winter. For the reconnect fee, we come back in the spring or early summer. We cut those back on for them. The reconnect fee, it's $30 or $50. 30. It's cheaper to pay the reconnect fee one time than to pay that minimum monthly bill all winter for the irrigation. And we see some of our military service members do the same. They know they're going to be going for an extended period of time on deployment. They'll do a disconnect and a reconnect.
Okay, thank you.
But before we get started in the details of any of the three utilities, I'll do, a real quick general conversation about the utilities as a whole, because there's a lot of similarities between all three of them. And I don't want to kind of belabor going over and over the same things and waste everybody's time. As a whole, we're going to present a budget to you that has no increases in any of our water, sewer, or electric rates for fiscal year 19, which is a good thing. We hope to try to continue doing that moving forward every year. I passed around a chart for you that helps to kind of explain a little bit of some of the challenges in trying to continue to do this moving year in, year out. What you've got before you there is a chart that shows the water and sewer customer base as well as revenue for the past 7 or 8 years. The top chart is your customer count, with the blue line representing your number of water customers, active water customers, and the green line representing your active number of sewer customers. And then there's a dotted line that kind of tracks the trend. So it's a little flatter line, takes some of the monthly deviations out of it. And what you'll see in that is kind of what you expect, a flat kind of a semi-steady growth through coming out of the recession. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've really done real well. We're growing at about 2.5 to 3% clip now with new customers that have been since about 2014. So that's good for us. We're heading in the right direction with growth in New Bern. That's really helping to keep our utilities stable. And our electric looks the same as far as the kind of the angle of these graphs. You look at the next chart down, kind of gives you a perspective in the challenge of the utilities, in that although our customer count and our customer base continues to grow, our revenues are flat or declining. And that's because of a good thing. It's because of conservation, both water conservation and electric conservation. It is a real thing. It is being recognized in our communities, and it's a great thing that we're conserving our resource. However, it does create a pretty unique business situation for us, in that as we grow our customer base, you would expect our revenues to continue to grow, and that to help us out moving year in and year out. However, what you'll see is it's quite the opposite. We're adding customers, we're growing customer base, we're bringing in less money monthly. So what you're looking at the graph on the bottom is our average monthly revenue for each of those months for the last 7 or 8 years. You can see that's a pretty steady decline downward. Right now, I will tell you, at least with the water and sewer, there's a lot of variability in the electric, just depending on what happens with our power supply cost, and that gets determined every year now with our new system in January with Nikempa. But with our water and sewer, I will tell you, we're at a pretty stable place. We're basically, if the growth continues at a pretty steady clip, the 2.5 to 3% for the going into the foreseeable future, I think we'll be fine and continue to keep our rates stable, and the growth will give us the additional revenue we need to offset increased operational costs. We've been able to shed these additional, these reductions of revenue over the last 6 or 7 years, largely by finding efficiencies in our operation. We've looked in every nook and cranny we can to try to find a better, a smarter, a quicker, a cheaper way to do what we do, and still provide all the service that we need to our customers, as well as meet all the conditions of our state permits. I will tell you, we're kind of at the bottom of the barrel with finding efficiencies. We're straining real hard to find minor improvements now that save us little dollars. We've kind of picked all the low-hanging fruit. We've found all the big efficiencies out there. We'll still continue to look. We'll still try to find anything we can to increase the efficiency of our operation. However, those gains are going to be minimal moving forward. So with that being said, moving into the next few years, the stability of at least our water and sewer rates is going to be tied pretty largely to growth and development. If we continue to grow residentially and commercially at about the same clip, I think we will bring in enough revenue to offset continued operational increases. If we have a recession in housing and commercial development like we saw going back 7 or 8 years ago, that's going to impact us tremendously. A lot of our costs in our water and sewer sectors are fixed costs with debt service, personnel costs, so they're not directly tied to the the amount of water you treat or the amount of sewer you treat.
Jordan, a couple questions. I see the sharp dip in the customer count towards the end. Was that just an anomaly?
It was. That was just an issue with when we run the report and when the meter readings came in. That happens once every 2 or 3 years. You'll see that where it's just that we don't lose that many customers that month. It's
Right.
just when the report runs, we haven't got a billing cycle in, and it times up just right about once every 3 or 4 years.
Right. So I've got 2 more questions. Next question. Know that Trent Woods has paid off their debt, but they're still paying double. So does that impact any of these numbers because they paid off the debt? And they're
It
still
doesn't.
paying double?
It actually, it's more beneficial for Trent Woods. The agreement we established with Trent Woods early on, they had certain benchmarks if they hit in customer count, and their rate was tied to those. They hit the last one a couple of years ago, which reduced it from 150% of the in-city rate to 135% of the in-city rate. That happened a couple of years ago. We kind of that was a revenue deduction for us. We adjusted to that, and we've gone on with it. There are no more reductions in it, so the rate we have now with Trent Woods is the rate we'll have for the foreseeable future. So adding customers to Trent Woods certainly helps us here.
Okay,
as
so
we
the last
continue.
question tied to this, because our revenue's going down, is where's our capacity? We're going to have this 2 or 3% growth, but what does that do to our capacity? Because that costs us if we have to increase capacity.
The good news is, customer count goes up, revenue and consumption go down, and that's what's driving the revenue down is consumption. People use less water, so our per capita water use, how much each individual home or each individual customer in New Bern uses, continues to just tick down ever so slightly every year. That is one of the great things about that is it's tremendously beneficial for your capacity. So if I took our projection models from the late 90s and early 2000s, we would be at the point now where we'd need a new sewer plant. With all the growth we've had, we should be building an expansion to our sewer plant. However, because each customer is using less, we can add more customers with the same capacity. So we're actually sitting very well in capacity of both water and sewer. Right now, we've got about 2.5 million gallons a day of excess capacity at our sewer plant. That's about 40% of our total load right now. So you could really almost double the size of our current customer base before you'd run out of capacity. As you get closer to those numbers, you have to start planning and getting some real concrete efforts in place. You can't get to the last gallon and then start. But we see that we don't foresee the need for that expansion in the next 5 years. And probably closer looking 10 years out before you need an expansion on that plant. And the water, we go off 25 or 30 years on projections before we look like we need any type of expansion on the water with current growth trends. Now, anything can change, and that would be great if New Bern doubled its population in the next 10 years and we had a tremendous amount of growth and development. We'd have to kind of back up and revisit that. But right now, with everything we've seen and talking with our commercial developers and our retailers and our residential developers, we are sitting in a very good position to be able to accommodate them capacity-wise. So that's just a common theme I wanted to kind of highlight for the utilities as a whole. So what we're presenting for all 3 of these budgets with the water, sewer, and electric is essentially a flat operating budget. There are some minor increases and decreases up and down. Nothing really that changes substantially. I'll cover the real highlights of capital and some of the personnel changes, but there's very little in here that's changed from the last couple of years. We've done a pretty good job of building in regular routine maintenance and infrastructure replacement programs in all 3 of those organizations. So there's money that we've been able to consistently put in all 3 of those for the last 4 or 5 years. So we're replacing a lot of infrastructure year in and year out. Rather than doing big projects every 4 or 5 years, we're taking that same money and we're doing it year in and year out, which is working really well. Trying to tie a lot of that as much as possible with public works repaving projects. So as they're getting in and doing resurfacing, we're trying to go in a few months ahead of them and take care of infrastructure needs underground, so we're not duplicating work or going back having to dig up brand new streets and put infrastructure. Do you have any questions from a very high level about the utilities before we dive into the details of the 3 individual funds?
The only thing I would have is if there's any strategic means of any future rate reductions by cost sharing or any other measures of revenue sources, et cetera. And I know you say, and I know Ms. Stevens has done a yeoman's job along with staff of reducing rates in the last couple of years. So,
and there's a couple of rate reductions. You'll see the bigger dips in here, and the bottom of that chart. Those are when we've implemented the rate reductions. 14, 15, we took those rate reductions in the water and sewer fund. Those are the bigger dips you see. And we were able to absorb those, and we're continuing to operate and provide the same level of service. However, moving forward, it would be something would have to change holistically in the water and sewer industry for
Well,
us
I
to
guess
look
you
at
will
the future.
get more into that in your discussion, but where historically some of the operational revenue sources have been actually sinking fund monies that were for future capital improvement that were actually put into operations, and you've lost that, I would assume, and you are now for futuristic purposes getting the water and sewer departments as to where when future needs of capacity increases, you'll have that money because of your reserve program. Somewhat.
Somewhat, yes, sir.
And I would like you to comment on that, but that might be later in your presentation.
Capital Reserve Fund, we can talk about that a little bit. And I will tell you largely how we've been able to buffer those. We found a lot of efficiencies. By permit, there's so many things you have to, you're very limited in what you can do. You've got to get very creative in how you trim your water and sewer costs. One of the few organizations in the city that actually has dictated what you do day in and day out by a plethora of state and federal permits. However, what we've been able to do is find efficiencies in staff. I will tell you, I took over the operation in 2009. I did my first budget presentation in the spring of 2010. We had 102 funded positions and field positions in our water resource group. This year, you'll see a total of 77. And that's where we basically found our efficiencies. We work smarter, we work harder, and the staff we have are very good at what they do, and they hustle very hard. So we're taking the same amount of work that gets done we did with 102, we're doing with 77 today.
The only thing I was looking at, I don't think you'd save a lot of money, and I know that the Black Creek aquifer is replenishing itself now from what I've read. If 5 or 10 years from now, if the capacity were there to go more back into it, and out of Castle Hayne, you would have some reduced charges for blending that water that you don't. In other words, we were spending very little money when we were totally in Black Creek, but I don't know what will happen on that, but I understand that those aquifers are becoming replenished. Is that
They
right?
are, yes, sir. They're doing very well, and what that has allowed us to do with the original reduction scheme in 2018 and this year, we should be 75% reduced, was by our original permit. However, we were able to go back and kind of prove our case to the state over the last couple of years that the aquifers at a sustainable level with New Bern withdrawing 50% of our base rate. So we have been able to kind of delay or actually probably permanently push off that last 25% reduction, and that really does help us because that allows us to still withdraw half of what we were withdrawing from our original base rate out of the Black Creek aquifer, and that is much cheaper water to treat and process through the system. So we take full advantage of that. We basically pull out all the Black Creek water we can every day, and then we make up the difference what we need with our water plant. So we're still maximizing that the high quality, low cost water.
Jordan, I'm just curious, under utilities 72310, for the last few years you've had $8,000-9,000 and you've got zero in there now.
Yes, ma'am. There are quite a few efficiencies scattered throughout this year's budget. You will find from the consolidation of our water resource administration and our water resource operations staff in the new facility out at the water plant. So that is the water resource admin's small portion they pay of the utilities at the Kell Road facility, kind of split that bill with electric. That staff is moving to the new facility at Highway 55. So one of the other operational divisions will just pick up the whole bill for that. It's all really the same money. It all comes out of the water fund.
Okay.
It's easier to have one division pay for that bill than
Understood.
split
Didn't
it
know if it
several
was
times.
error
Yep.
or something.
Nope, that's a very good question. All right, we'll jump into it real quickly then. Page 173 is kind of the start of the water fund. You'll see there that's the highlights in revenue. The bottom line there number kind of highlights some of what we talked about. You're looking at about a 1.4% reduction is what we're projecting for total revenue decrease next year. Trying to be as conservative as we can with our budget and make sure we've got everything we need. So we may be a little too conservative. We'd rather come in the black than come in the red at the end of the year and make sure we've got the money to continue to operate.
What was 180,000 miscellaneous?
Cell phone tower leases on our water tanks.
That's a
Well,
very good.
didn't you have anything before, or did you have it budgeted somewhere else? Or?
It was set up before, we actually rolled into the general fund before.
How many of those do we have?
Cell tower leases, we have quite a few. We have them on every water tank we own. We have a company that administers those leases for us, and they take care of all the negotiation of the contracts, as well as making sure we basically just get a check from them. They collect all the fees, and I think they keep a percentage of the total as their compensation for that service. Been a very good service. They've done a good job of getting us out of some bad leases we had that were not beneficial to us. They know the industry very well, and they do two things. They make sure we get as much money as we can from the cell phone companies that are leasing the space, and they also make sure that when the cell phone companies are on the tanks, that they're not damaging the tank. You've got essentially a multi-million-dollar piece of infrastructure there. You don't want the wrong guy there, the welder, and it can cause you a huge problem. So the company that actually does our annual maintenance contracts for our tanks is also the same company that manages the cell phone leases. So it's in their best interest to make sure that everything is done to the letter of the specifications when the cell phone companies are up there doing work, because if not, this is the company's got to come back in and do the fix. So it worked. The relationship works very well.
And JR, so that money goes into the general fund?
It used to go into the general fund. It's actually never should have gone there to begin with. It's actually a water resources revenue. These are they're water towers, and they're mounted on the water towers, and they're basically leasing the top of those towers. So this money should have actually always gone to water, but previously before this budget year, it was in the general fund, but now we're moving into water.
Okay.
And there again, we've kind of really looking as those, as the revenues have kind of been flat, we're really opening up every page and making sure that we haven't overlooked something. This is something we kind of come across this year that probably should have caught several years ago, but we've got it in the right place now. All right, the first division in water resources, water resource admin, starts on page 177. Nothing special there. It's essentially, this is the group of 5 or 6 of us that administer the water resource. We do the engineering work. This is the small group that's housed at Kell Road. They will be consolidated with the operations staff at the new facility once we have that building finalized. Hopefully the end of June, we'll have everybody moved in. There is one capital item there. We're replacing a 07 F-150 with 160,000 miles on it. That's really the only capital outlay there. And Alderman Bingle has picked up on probably the most significant change in the operation, which is the zeroing out of the utilities. Any questions on?
Well, the only question I have, I know you said you dropped quite a few positions, but I guess it's scattered throughout your budget. Your overall salaries, are they down from all that?
Over that 5 or 6 year, that 7 or 8 year period, yes, sir. Now, this year, I think we have a net gain of, we have a net loss of 1 position this year. We go from there were 78 funded last year. There'll be 77 funded this year. My previous comment was going back to 2010. So if you look over the stretch in the last 7 or 8 years, we have found ways every year to kind of consolidate some roles and responsibilities, and we've done all that through attrition. So as people have retired or gone out for other reasons, we take a hard look at what that individual does. And is there a way to share that among the other staff? Is there a way to, can we find an efficiency somewhere else? Technology has helped us out a lot over the last 4 or 5 years. We've been able to use a lot of newer technology we're using to make everybody's job a little more efficient. So it's a little easier to share those responsibilities. So over that 8 year period where we've lost those 24 or 25 positions, it's a few every year we've been able to find. But moving forward, I will tell you, I go back to the comment, I think we've kind of hit the bottom of the barrel. I think we've scraped as far as we can and we've cut as deep as we can. Moving forward, it's going to be hard to find those same type of cost reductions in years to come. So our kind of the fate of the stability of our water and sewer rates will be tied more than it ever has in our growth and development.
Well, do you think that with AMI that we actually are more on top of our game of any losses or inaccurate reporting of usage by consumers that brings in more potential revenue?
You get a couple of things. One, you get a highly accurate reading, and you're getting new infrastructure. So some of the meters we're pulling out of the ground are in excess of 50 or 60 years old. and we're putting a brand new mechanical device in there. So over time, that wears. The gears in there, the mechanism actually doing the metering for you will wear over time, and that varies depending on water composition and amount of solids and things like that. But so at the worst case, by the time we're doing the AMI, the oldest AMI meter in the ground will be 4.5 years old. So we have new infrastructure. You're getting accurate readings through the AMI system. Yeah, the water loss issues should really help out. But it's not going to be substantial. You're not going to see major gains in this that are going to overcome the compensation factor, because we've actually been adding those meters for the last 4.5 years. And you can notice some difference when you go pull an individual meter, individual account, look at that. But as a whole, the conservation is still chewing into the total consumption pretty good. There are, like I said, a lot of pros to it. I mean, the capacity benefit is the pro to the conservation. Any other questions on water resource administration? All right, water treatment starts on page 182. No major changes there operationally or with staff, same number of staff, essentially about the same operation, pretty flat across there. A couple pieces of capital. We have one pickup truck for replacements in 06 with 200,000 miles on it. And then we've added $60,000 in the operating budget for conversion of our ammonia system from gas to liquid. We did at our Cove City sites. We did our plant this year. We budgeted the money, or in the process of taking care of that now, and we'll make the conversion at the Cove City sites next budget year. Try to split that cost over 2 budget years. But other than that, it's a pretty standard year for the.
JR, just a question.
Yes, sir.
I noticed in most of the general funds, your estimated FY 17-18 look like they've been adjusted, but it doesn't appear to be that way in the enterprise. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, sir. I did more scrutiny actually I scrutinized all of the general fund lines, so that way to have a better idea of what our fund balance percentage was going to be. Days cash on hand for water and sewer and electric are more secure, so it's less concerning.
All right, thank you.
Any questions on the water treatment plant? All right. Our water distribution system maintenance, these are our field operation guides, starts on page 197. And here we do have a few changes. You'll notice at the top, you'll see our full-time positions is a reduction from 25 to 19. That's not a reduction in staff, that's just a shift of those positions from the water distribution system maintenance to the sewer distribution system maintenance. Those individuals work pretty much interchangeably, day in and day out. From time to time, we will shift a number of them back and forth between where they're funded from, depending on what we anticipate the workload to be in the year to come. So that's pretty common in the budget cycle. You'll see this almost every year. We'll shift some of the staff from water distribution system to sewer collection system maintenance back and forth. So there's always a couple of positions that change there. Capital in there, we've got our $200,000 for our various water system improvements. So that's something we've incorporated in the last 4 or 5 years. That gives us some ongoing money every year for infrastructure improvements. And then we've got 2 pickup trucks for replacement. We've got an 03 with 170,000 miles and an 08 with 150,000 miles in the capital. Other than that, it's like I said, once again, just a fairly standard operating budget. We don't anticipate anything major there.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am.
What is land rentals for $3,500?
Most of those are going to be lease rentals from the railroad company.
Oh,
So we actually have several lease agreements with the railroad for pipe infrastructure under the tracks. Some of them, depending on the year the agreement was executed, some of them were a one-time flat payment. Some of them were an annual lease going every year. So that's what that is. Any additional questions? All right. Those are basically the operating funds. If you get into 209, you go through the debt, which is just following the debt schedules. It drops down just a little bit from just some of the changes in what the interest and principal payments are going to be. But that's based on the debt schedule. Nothing major came off. Nothing going on this year.
for either one of those.
What about your water capital reserve? Why are you reducing that?
Okay, let me get to you there, Mayor.
209.
I don't have.
On page 209?
Yeah.
I don't have a 209 mine. Mine skips.
Water fund, transfer to general pilot is about the same, but the transfer to water capital reserve, you don't have a 209?
No, I didn't get one. It left me out. What page you said 209?
It's
Yeah.
right in front of sewer fund.
Yeah, it's right there, you don't have to have 208.
No, I don't have that. Mine skips from 172 and it's empty. Can I get that?
Is it possible, what do you have there?
I've got a different page number. My 209 is a debt service.
Well, okay, well, let me give you a line. It's 82,165.
Georgia's interfund transfers for water fund. It's a 3 on interfund transfers.
Okay. All right, I've got the
Looking at
page.
the water capital reserve.
82,165.
Yes, sir.
So what's going on there?
The reason the number's down, we'll be implementing some changes July 1 with our old capital recovery fees. We'll change to system development fees. We'll have a lot more about that coming up in some meetings here in May, late May. But what we're essentially, you'll have a small reduction in what those fees are.
Oh, yeah.
So we're looking at bringing less money into those.
Is that part of your meeting with the developer group?
Yes, sir. So we've been working for almost the past year trying to make sure we check all the boxes with the new general statute, getting our local developers, stakeholders group engaged with that, make sure they understand what the changes are. A lot of input for them that went into it.
Okay.
Scott's working on the polishing just the front part of the revised ordinance, and we're looking to bring that to you either the last meeting in May or the first meeting in June for effective date of July 1. So our old capital recovery fees go away. They're now called system development fees. And the net effect of all of it is there's about a 12 to 15% reduction in the water and sewer system development fees moving forward. So that's why you see a little less revenue in that number. Good, very good question.
I'm just going back, I don't understand this on page 198 where it says payments made on agreement. What would that be? Because it was 59,800, now it's 5,000. Usually you see debt service, but this is payments made on agreement.
We've got several agreements. They're development type agreements that date back to the late 80s, early 90s, some of them. And they've got, each one of them is a little different. Each one of them has some different conditions. So they're essentially a repayment of water and sewer infrastructure costs to developers, most of the time through reimbursement of connection fees or capital recovery fees. Some of those years, and some of them, they kind of pay out. And we know that this is the last 4 or 5 lots here. So we kind of look at that every year, the agreements that are left and what we anticipate coming in through those. And that's where we generate that number. So depending on what the development was, what the timeline was, there's some years where that's a bigger number. And there's some years, like last year was a bigger number. This year, we're basically just basing on a handful of home builds and one development. That's, I think, the only thing that would trigger the number moving forward this year. So it's the good news, we're almost at the end of those. We got a handful of lots scattered out throughout different places. Once those are built out, we're kind of done with those. We haven't made a new one, at least in the last 10 years. So it's those are almost a done deal.
How do you divvy out the cost? Like recently in downtown New Bern, we had somebody put in a new water service, so they pay the capital recovery fee to put that new water service in, but they had to cut up all the brick, then Public Works had to come in, and Public Works had to do their thing, so how do you allocate those funds?
We
Because
don't.
obviously-
We have a set fee for our water and sewer connection. We have a connection fee, and it's tiered a couple different ways. And unfortunately, it's very laborsome to try to capture the exact cost of every connection. So we have a couple of tiers. We'll charge you whatever tier is appropriate you fall into. With some of those, I will tell you, the city loses. With some of those, we win. We try to get what the average cost is. If you look at it over a couple of years, what was our average cost to do this type of work? And that's how we try to generate that connection fee. And there's not a lot of difference, only a couple $100 difference between the tiers.
That's the way we do it. So with some of them,
So you don't necessarily credit the Public Works Department with any funds
we
because they
don't.
had to expend labor and materials.
Well, what we do is we have a pretty significant charge that comes out of the water and sewer fund every year to some of the public works divisions to help cover some of the costs like that.
Jordan, I have a question on page 208,
Okay.
your water fund shared services. Can you explain that to me, please? I know this is individual departments portion that's shared. What is it?
Yep, I gotcha. Yes, ma'am, shared service. So this is the water fund, and you'll see one of these for the water, the sewer, and electric. So this is our proportionate share of the general fund services that we utilize. So if you thought about it, if the water and sewer and electric funds were their own companies, they would have to have an HR department. We'd have to have our IT department, accounting department. What we do is we use the city services for that. We use the general fund services instead of having those internally to the utilities. So we pay a proportionate share of the HR costs and the IT costs. It works well for us. So instead of having to have a utilities IT guy and a utilities HR director, we can utilize the existing services that are set up within the general fund, and we just pay our fair share. And Mr. Sabertelli could probably give you an idea. Those are all allocated a little differently.
Okay.
Some of them, I think HR is just per head. There's a charge per head. Some of them, they actually look at each year how much work does that department do for the various funds, and we allocate it that way. So there's a different way of kind of calculating which each one of these numbers, what these numbers are going to be each year, and we each kind of pay our fair share with the water, sewer, and electric. All get a piece of these.
Yeah, because what really captured my eye was the governing board, how we fell into that.
And we pay a proportionate share. And so
Because we're departments.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I think we pay a proportionate share of almost every general fund organization other than, and I think police, fire, and parks and rec, because they really don't do anything for us. Oh, sorry. Development service, there you go. Very good question. Any additional questions? That's kind of the tail end of the water section. Are there any questions on water? If not, I'll move into the sewer portion. All right, our sewer starts on page 219, I think.
211.
211. I got a difference.
I think you
Okay.
had the number after we sent that to you, so I apologize.
That's okay. All right, sewer fund, much like the water, you look at our total revenue there is going to be a little less than what we anticipated from last year. Some of that up in the operational side is actually a little more, or in the basic customer service. On the top part of the revenues there, you'll see we actually have a small uptick in revenues versus the decrease. And what that is, on our sewer side of things, we have a larger customer base in our water, and we also have a bigger industrial presence in our sewer. So our biggest sewer customers are actually industrial users. So you don't see the same impacts with conservation with those folks that you do with our typical residential and commercial customers. So that's the reason you don't see the exact correlation between water users and sewer users and some of those declines in per capita use.
So late penalties for this year have been $100,000.
That's what our estimate is. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is an estimate of what we think we would charge someone.
Well, that's our estimate and what we think based on where we were at the end of the calendar year. In January 1, we look at the numbers in January 1, and we see what we've already brought in through late penalties, and then we kind of make a projection, what we think it's going to, a conservative projection, what we think it's going to be for the remainder of the year, and we try to come up with what those estimated values are going to be. Just trying to give us a ballpark, see if we're going to be in the black or in the red, or we need to make some adjustments moving into the last half of the fiscal year.
Jordan, at the bottom where you transfer 281,618 line item 81190 transfer from other funds, what are the other funds?
Yes, ma'am. So what we, Mr. Salvatelli saved us some money in financing a few years ago and did some refinancing with our Trent Woods debt. However, so we extended the life of that loan out further, but we were bringing payments in from Trent Woods that stopped this year. We got our last Trent Woods payment this year. So what we've been doing is taking money and putting it into a, what we call it, a
Debt service fund.
debt service fund for the last few years. We've been taking a portion of our Trent Woods payment and putting it in that. Now that we're done with that, we're basically, now we can pay the Trent Woods, we continue to pay the Trent Woods loan off.
And
Do you
just for
consider that a revenue then, not a, even though it was a revenue before?
So what that is now, so the 281 now is the money coming out of, so for this year, we don't have a Trent Woods payment coming in, but we do have a debt payment we need to make. So this is 281,000 coming in from the debt
debt service fund.
debt
Excess.
service fund
Yes.
as revenue, and basically then we'll turn around and we'll make our annual debt payment out of this.
And just for clarification, I appreciate the kudos, but that actually wasn't me that did the refinance. That was previous administration.
Okay.
So, but thank you.
Just for an FYI, JR,
Yes, ma'am.
so down the road, when you have things like this, not an enterprise fund, let's just say in the general fund, when you may have refinanced something, saved it, put into an account like this, does this just go to fund balance? Would that amount go to fund balance, or is it in a separate account?
Yeah, this actually was a whole different animal. Normally, what would happen is the debt payments would just change, and any savings would be seen in budget modifications or would go into fund balance, depending on how the restructuring worked. For example, with our Kale Road refinancing, that was one that I actually did. We saved about $1.8 million by refinancing that debt. But the savings will come in future years, so you see it in your annual budget amount, not necessarily as a one-time increase in fund balance.
Okay.
In this particular instance, it's a little different. As Mr. Hughes stated, the money would come in from Trent Woods, and the amount that was necessary to pay the debt service each year was retained in the sewer fund, and the debt was paid. And that portion of the debt was paid. Anything in excess of that was required was put into the debt service fund, just to basically sit there and act as a savings account until we need it, until Trent Woods payments actually stopped, which is again starting in FY19. So that's why you see that money coming back in. So it's a different animal.
Yeah. Is there a place where in our budget book we see all these little squirrel holes?
The debt service fund, the sewer debt service fund is actually on page 395. You can see the budget. You can see the budget
So if we were
activity.
looking for extra money, know where to look. Okay, sewer debt. So that's it, once you spend this is all you've got in there?
No, that's the budgeted amount for FY19. There is more money sitting there, but it was basically reserved to pay the future debt service payments.
Understand, where do I see how much money you've got in that? Is there anywhere in the budget that tells you how much?
As far as what I'm going to call the fund balance in there, that is not within the
Okay.
budget.
All right,
And I would imagine once we're done with the Trent Woods payments, that fund will essentially just be closed.
Yes, that's correct.
Go away.
Well, from what Alderman Bingham was saying, just for me to keep it simplistic, if you, for some reason, doing a stomp loan, get $100,000, in fiscal year 2018-19, or if we did it right now and did a budget amendment, your fund balance would improve. But at what time would it go down because of the incremental debt service charge on it?
Yeah.
It would depend on what you're doing, how you set it up, I'm sure.
Yes. And for the general fund, absolutely. It just depends on the timing of it, and it actually decrease. It would be set to decrease over the future years as you make those debt payments. So, and just for clarification, so and for your information, the balance as of right now in that sewer debt service reserve fund is $1.16 million, and again, that is reserved for the future debt service payments of this loan, which I believe pays out in full in 2022 or 2023.
so do we have the money in there to pay it off now?
No. We would have to use a substantial amount of sewer reserve. I've been looking at that, and
I mean, this debt fund's got $1 million too, if your payments are 281.
that's a substantial loan. I'll bring you the information on
Okay.
that. It's
But generally speaking, at any given time, in any given year, a fund balance in an enterprise fund could have a relevant range of 2 or 3%. In other words, if you're at 34%, it actually is more of a relevant range depending on what you've got set up and how you got it set up. It could be 32 to 38%, let's say, or does it vary much more than that?
Yeah, we can modify the fund balance percentage of the general fund based on how much debt we take out that particular year, and it has an impact on future years.
I'm just saying that because, we've established policy of the 25, 35% rule, and we wouldn't want to go off thinking we're at 26% when we're actually from a range, based on these, where you're setting these things up. We might be 18%, or we might be positive on it.
I understand.
All right, our first operational division in the sewer fund is our sewer treatment division. Starts on page 217. I think I got on the right page numbers with you now.
Which one is it?
217. We do have one personnel change there. We're as part of some of the reorganization with our consolidation at the new facility. We have one office assistant reposition that has been transferred to the sewer treatment plant to help out administratively over there. One important thing to note in the operating line items, your second note there in operating you see is our chemicals required for treatment process. That $368,000 is 25% lower, or about $130,000 lower than it has been the last few years. This is somewhere where the guys and gals at the plant have worked very hard the last couple of years in redeveloping some of our chemical feed processes and controls, and have found a way to significantly decrease the amount of one of our most expensive treatment chemicals. So their efforts have saved the city $130,000 next year. Move down to capital. We have a few kind of wear and tear items there at the plant. We have a new washer at our lab, a roof on one of the old original digester buildings, and then a generator for our MB7 plant, and a new compact tractor that actually replaces two existing pieces of equipment, both 1980s vintage. We have a loader and a tractor. This new compact tractor will replace those two existing. One compact SUV replaces a 2003 pickup truck with 125,000 miles on it. And the one on-site utility vehicle is also a 2003 model with 6,500 hours. So we're getting about 15 years out of the vehicles and equipment before we're needing to replace, which has been pretty good. Operationally, no major deviations from the last few years. The one major jump is that decrease in treatment chemicals from the processes that the guys are going to have been able to implement in the last few months, and will continue to moving forward. So that's a great savings. As the plant continues to wear and tear, we do have a little more, and you'll probably see little upticks in the next few years just in the general parts and repairs. The last plant upgrade was in 2002. So everything out there is now getting in that 15, 16-year-old window. We're starting to experience some minor repairs needed and expected. So but we'll continue to do that, and what we have will last us a long time at the treatment plant.
JR, could you provide us with a summary of, I know we talked about it briefly yesterday, on the lease program for copiers and printers. So citywide, if we could see a combined number, because we got 5,000 here, 6,000 here, and those things are adding up, and
It's almost $200,000 when you take every, I think, 10 departments.
Because I think you did something a couple years ago.
Yeah, we did, because what happened was that several years ago we had just a copier lease.
Mm-hmm.
So what it was that they went out, they got copier leases throughout the city, and they got some just small machines. Whether or not they actually fit the department's needs or not, who knows? But what we did was we went out with that lease, and we worked with our copier provider. They provided us with not only new copy machines that were more modern and had a lot more capabilities, but they also provided us with desktop machines that were laser jet printers and things like that. And that lease included a per click charge. So we had an allotment of clicks for that. So what that did was we got rid of all the desktop machines, all these little machines people would go out and spend $100 on, but then they would spend like $300 a year in toner. So what happened? So when you're talking like 20 cents a page versus what we're paying now per click, which is like, for color is 7 cents a page. So all that basically got shifted up into it. Included in those costs though for Jordan, for PD, for Public Works, and for actually two of them for Jordan was a plotter. Was plotters. They didn't. They all needed new plotters. They were going to be requesting new plotters. So rather than going out and buying and doing a capital charge on plotters, which you're talking $12,000 to $14,000, we got with them. They liked what they saw, and that's included in that lease. So
Did you say it was $200,000?
$100,000.
Okay, that's still.
It's a lot of money.
it's a lot of money. We got a lot of people, a lot of locations all over the place.
And that includes the repair, the contracts too is what's expensive on top of it.
So if you gave us a summary of that accounting code line item, can you show historical references so we can see, or was office supplies being charged in one line item, service contract?
Yeah, they were charged to various line items. They were charged to the IT supply line item. They were charged to the office supply line item. They were charged, the copy release itself was charged to the copy release line item. They were charged to various places throughout the city. So to actually go back and do a full-fledged look at every single line, it would be substantial. Like I said, we had to do a more of an aggregate approach to it to look and see what the total clicks were. And I can provide you with some of the documentation if you like.
We've been doing this program for what, 2 years? 2 or 3 now?
I think we're on our third. This is our third year.
Was it a contract, 3-year
It was
contract?
5-year contract.
5-year contract.
Yeah. And also keep in mind there have been a couple of changes to it. PD did not like one of the machines they got, and they got a better machine. Development Services was the same way. They needed a better machine, so we transferred the machine over to PD. So they're having a couple of minor modifications throughout the last couple of years.
Would it be cheaper to buy the machine now?
You still got to pay the service maintenance on those. The big thing that I do need to go back and look at is the clicks themselves, because we have an allotment. It's about 100,000 clicks a month. So I need to go back and we have a lot of pages and a lot of paper that we go through each year.
That doesn't include any billing, right? Any
That's
billing
correct.
that's handled outside?
That's correct.
100,000 copies.
Yes. So all of that has changed over the last few years because over the last 3 years, our utilization has changed. We've actually, my department alone, we've switched over to doing a lot more PDFs. So rather than printing a bunch of copies and stuff, for example, before I got here, the previous finance director had printed his budget book that thick. I'm sorry, not budget book, the agenda booklet. Every one for a month is like this thick. I don't do that. That's 100 pages plus each agenda.
You want to know what else is interesting? Every single PO that we have generates, I couldn't tell you how many pieces of paper on average. Well, that's just the carbon copy portions.
Yes.
I'm not talking about the copies and the prints of the PDF forms of the purchase order because of the process that we've been doing. Now with this Munis system, the department heads will have the ability to do electronic approvals rather than having to sign and print off all of this stuff. So I'm hoping that we're going to see some significant reductions in our copies and print just from that. But I mean, every single PO that we have in the city has to be that way.
Copy Pro. Did we bid that out? Was that a process where we bid it out and looked for the best bid, or we just?
That was just an expansion of the contract that we had at the time with them.
Did you guys already talk about purchasing and do like the paper and all that stuff?
Yeah.
So we can't just have a central location where all copying is done with like a few machines in an empty building that we have?
The thing of it is, you're not talking about like a central processing system. You're talking about the clerk needs to be able to print stuff downstairs. I need to be able to print stuff here. IT needs to print stuff upstairs. Jordan's over at Kill Road right now. All that stuff is included in that. For the UBO, we do have a centralized, we do have a contract where we send all of our bills out every time we process them. So we don't actually print and stuff and mail our bills. We actually contract that service out. So,
Okay, so,
and you'll see that contract when we talk about the
I guess it would be interesting if we could bid that out or look at that, just to see, because the cost of it monthly divided to each department is high, but it's the service and the maintenance contract is where they get you.
Yeah.
And
right,
that's
so if you have,
excessive.
so it's not feasible to kind of like, if something happens to the copier, pay the fee at that time instead of having the contract and we're not using it all the time. I mean, if we have machines that are breaking down every month, then we need to get a new machine. But a good machine should last you a long time, where we don't need to actually have a service contract on it, and we just kind of pay as you go.
The service contract is part of that per click charge. Plus, we don't pay for ink, so all of our ink is included in the amount we pay for that.
Okay, so it's not cheaper to go purchase our own paper and get our own ink.
Well, we pay for our own paper, but not the ink.
No.
The only ink that we pay for is for the plotters.
And the other thing is, if one breaks down with this contract, you usually have them there that day. And I've sat for days before waiting for somebody to come fix a printer when we're running a contract.
So like in this department, you're paying roughly $29,000 for the year for the copier and the maintenance contract. It's a lot of money.
You
So
can go to Staples,
multiply
you
that
go to
times-
about Staples and buy a new copier every month for that.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that financial detail, and I also like to see a copy of the contract.
Absolutely.
All right, moving forward, our next sewer operational division is the sewer system collection maintenance division, which starts on page 229.
Jordan, let me ask you a quick question. You made the comment that a couple of your employees found another way of doing something and saved the city a tremendous amount of money. Tell us again what that was. And
One of our chemicals we feed at the wastewater treatment plant for nitrogen reduction, we had it based on a constant feed rate, so it just fed the same rate all the time. They found a way to monitor a couple of different parameters of the effluent as well as the flow rate, and found a way to meter the dose pump to basically match that. So they optimized that. Instead of having a constant feed rate all the time, sometimes you're putting more chemical in there than you needed, sometimes you weren't enough. They really killed two birds with one stone. They have saved the money in the treatment chemical, and they have also optimized that nitrogen reduction. So in some months some days you weren't getting enough in there, and the nitrogen numbers were coming up. So now that we got a pretty stable nitrogen number in our effluent, and we're doing it with less chemical than we were before. It's all just then basically going back to the drawing board with our process control and how that was in place. We've been doing it the same way since we put that part of the treatment process online. They kind of scratched their heads and looked at it and thought there was a better way of doing it, and found a quite better way of doing it.
And it saves how much money?
We're projecting about $130,000 a year, about 25% reduction in our total treatment cost, our total treatment chemical cost, I'm sorry.
You can't thank them enough. That's what it's all about right there.
So they get a raise, right?
We'll see. We hope.
Before you get to-
Alderman Astor, I made a suggestion 4 years ago that the city initiate a plan that any employee that saves the city a dollar amount, they get a 10% that first year in savings.
Yeah.
So they would essentially have gotten $13,000.
I mean, that's
and
just-
Did
that's-
they vote on that, or they said no? Oh, wow.
So that's what you call incentive working, and that's what motivates people to do a better
Yeah,
job.
I mean,
Because, show me the money and it
versus a
motivates you.
2% cost of living increase, which is
Nothing.
you need to.
Well, if we
That's why we
proactivate
didn't
that,
do
they
it.
should get 13,000 if they're still here.
I wish that would have been in place for me with the rate reductions.
Moving on.
You don't want to go there.
You don't count.
Maybe that's the reason why it wasn't
Would you
approved.
personally tell them thank you very much for a
I
hard,
sure will.
for
Sure,
a
I'll
good
see
job,
all of
great
them
job.
Friday
Thank
morning.
you.
Gotcha,
I'll let them know. To the sewer collection maintenance division, page 229. You see some increases in the staff there. That's not a real increase. That's just kind of a net wash from sliding those folks that we moved from the water side to the sewer side. The same guys doing the same thing. We're just paying them out of a different fund. Moving through this division, operationally, very few changes. The operation section, this is about 4% net decrease over the year, just minor decreases across the board. I will note, if you look, there's some big numbers in the operating highlights as well as the capital. When you put all that together, it's about $1.3 million worth of infrastructure repair, replacement, rehab. And this is pretty much scheduled annually. So, I've heard some comments, just kind of in the community that we don't do enough with infrastructure replacement. This is kind of built into our budget. We're doing over $1 million without any special projects, special funds. We do between $1 million and $1.5 million worth of infrastructure replacement repair. In our sewer fund, we do about $750,000 to $1 million the same way in our water fund every year. So we're out there doing a lot of it. It doesn't get thrown out in big chunks at a time, but we are doing quite a bit in infrastructure replacement, repair, and rehab every year. Have a very old system, we have to take care of it. Any particular questions on the operations division, maintenance division? That's really it for the operational divisions of the sewer fund. If you move into page, I think 242, you will get into the shared services. And much like the water fund, that's just our proportionate share of the shared services. Small uptick in that just reflects the increased cost of some of those those line items this year.
Why does electric administration not pay? Didn't pay into the other one, doesn't pay into this one. Is there a reason?
Historically, electric administration has paid a small piece of the water and sewer. So the water and sewer have paid a small piece back to electric administration. Largely just for some oversight in the holistic view of the utilities. These are two divisions under the under the utilities director. Looking at the way we kind of are going to operate with the new facility, there's essentially no reason for that to have that cost moving forward. We decided to pull it out for this year. Any additional questions for that really kind of wraps up the sewer fund. Any additional questions there?
Jordan?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question I just want to ask. I noticed that, and it's going back to the water treatment, it's for the chemicals.
Okay.
Chemicals for the water treatment, it's like $250,000. And then you have the chemicals required for treatment for the waste, and it's $368,000. So that $250,000, that's all it takes per year just for water treatment?
Yes, ma'am. And treatment chemicals, our water treatment process is a little less complex than the sewer treatment. Water treatment, the chemicals really, we've got a corrosion inhibitor, corrosion control. We've got chlorine, we've got ammonia, and that's really it. There's not a lot on the water treatment side. On the sewer treatment, it gets a little more involved with you're having to run through your normal effluent cycle. And then we also have another process in that where we have to take the sludge and create a Class A biosolid with the sludge. We have some chemicals involved with that, mostly agricultural lime is the biggest cost. So it's a much more involved process with the sewer. That's where the reason the sewer cost is more expensive.
Well, if we need more for the water.
Hopefully we don't. I'm hoping
For the drinking water.
We'll be just fine
for
with
our
what we have.
citizens, yeah.
I mean, it's all very well regulated.
Okay.
Everything is very well controlled. There are no corners to cut with chemicals, I will tell you that. Once the processes are set up and everything's set like they're supposed to be, you have to maintain certain levels of, with dozens of different parameters we test daily. So whatever it costs to treat the water to state and federal standards is what it will cost.
Thank you.
Mr. Jordan, page 242, line item 7811.2. What's the difference? There's almost $100,000 difference. Is that part of Munis for the information technology?
The IT
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
distribution,
what page you on?
242, Joe.
242.
78112.
Shared services for the sewer fund.
IT, is that what you're talking about, the one that says information technology on
Yeah.
242? That's his proportionate share for the sewer fund for IT services. So as we go through all of these different enterprise funds, they pay a proportionate share towards that department's cost.
But why did it go
Yeah,
up
why did it go up
$100,000?
$100,000?
Oh, why did it go up 100,000?
Because I don't have that in this explanation.
Yeah, I think we adjusted the allocation a little bit for the IT department, for the sewer and water funds, because our analysis that we do on these shared services indicated that they needed to up because of the services that they provide.
Okay, so they utilize more IT.
Yeah, well, it could be associated with a lot of things by IT, whether
Okay.
that's, it's across the board technically. And I think some of the heavier burden was being put on, was it the electric or was it
Yeah, it was a lot of the heavier burden was actually on the general fund.
the general fund too? But yeah, so the general and electric were carrying a lot heavier load than the water and sewer, so we distributed that a little more equitably.
Mayor Outlaw, back in the day, IT used to pick up the brunt of the transfers and shared services. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It's interesting to see 100,000 there. That's a pretty big jump.
I will tell you, we're a very laborsome technology. With
And
all of our
AMI,
SCADA
sure.
operations, we run numerous servers. We run a lot of stuff that the general city organization doesn't. We have a lot going on in the background, day in and day out, to make sure all our processes work. And our IT support department has done a very good job of helping us support that and keep it running. Technology is a great thing. It helps us be more effective, more efficient. Unfortunately, you got to keep it running like
Well, your
anything
water and
else.
sewer's on the AMI, correct? So that,
They are, so we utilize so that's part
That
of it. So
technology.
all the expansion of the backbone infrastructure to help all that out. And a lot of stuff that you don't even see behind the scenes with servers and network switches, and those things are incredibly expensive.
And then you got the underground infrastructure with the fiber network, which is housed entirely in the electric department. So when we did the evaluation, it was just appropriate for us to adjust the IT.
Basically, your three enterprise funds are paying about $1 million of the 1.6 million IT. And, I mean, I don't know how to break that
Yeah,
down,
I mean,
but
if you've done the math, I can do it real quick, but.
well, I mean, if IT's 1.6 and the water and sewer's 540 and electric's 460, I mean, you're looking at about $1 million. I don't know how to break that down. But again,
whoever's using it, that's who's using it.
it's $1 million in the enterprise is paying for the 1.6 million, so.
I'll tell you personally, Tony Gatlin's number 2 on my speed dial. I think Mark's number 1, Tony's is number 2.
Everybody should have a Tony. Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is how you allocate it, but I mean, Jordan, your water sewer department, you're 111, 112, I mean, employees total are you at now?
77.
Huh?
77.
In water and sewer?
Yes, sir.
77, and then you add electric, that's another 55 or so. Employee-wise, the time you take that and the utility business office portions and everything else, I mean, it starts playing out pretty appropriately if you start weighing at it. And that's really not how we analyze it. It's really based on the usage with the electric department, especially with
Okay.
POs and everything else.
I was just about to ask the utility business office, what's allocated in this, because I don't have the packet for the description, but from FY 16-17 to now is
Are you
almost
talking for sewer?
$300,000 jump, yeah, on page 242.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that the system or?
No, that's actually the cost of the utility business office, the staff, everything associated with the business office. The meter readers, the collectors, the services, anything that we have going on in the business office, that's the sewer's proportional share of that.
Just for,
JR, what is the total engineering bill for the city nowadays?
Total engineering bill?
Yeah, I mean, like in sewer, we got $20,000 expense to engineering professional services. Of course, I don't know if that's contract or if that's,
Yeah.
I know years ago we quite a bit of adjusting in what the total engineering fees of the city were. They look pretty reasonable now, if not a little bit low, so I don't know what the total is.
We do a lot of in-house work where we can, where we have the capabilities and staff to do. We try to do as much in-house work as we can these days across the board through departments. Most of what you see built in here, especially in these funds, will be smaller amounts where we need a geotech guy or a groundwater management, some specialty where we need some help throughout the year. So we always put a number in there, kind of based on historical uses. So that's surveyors. We no longer have a surveyor, a licensed surveyor on staff. So we need a surveyor need for easements or plots or anything like that. And also with a lot of the water and sewer industry as well as the electric industry, we have some specialties that we just don't have the capabilities in-house. Geotechs work, groundwater flow path modeling work that we need done from time to time, things like that we have to kind of farm out to sub-consultants. But it is a lot smaller number than it historically was, just largely because we do so much in-house.
I mean, 20 years ago or so, the city had, the engineer for the city would do things for cemetery, water, sewer, electric, and then you would expense it. So pretty much all you're doing now is contract out, which you can pretty much put an absolute on where it's being expended. And I assume that's what you're doing in your budgeting.
I think you'll see almost, it's broken out in each fund, each department. So each department of the water will have what the appropriate thing they think would need to be for the contract. Same with electric. I know Mr. Montaigne's public work budget, he's probably got a small number in there for engineering and professional services as well. So it's actually paid for by the divisions these days.
Yeah, the other place you might see engineering costs might be within the project itself, and in one of the project funds if we have something like that going on that would require that service.
Any other questions for Jordan on sewer fund? Okay. Move on to the electric fund, if everybody good?
I would like, Mr. Hughes made one comment about, I think part of what you're talking about with the money that was saved, what nitrogen, like 29,000 pounds a year or something like that, you found it was like 22 or 23?
We've got, right now, our allocation's about 64,000 pounds of nitrogen a year is what we're permitted discharge to the Neuse River through our allocation permit.
Okay, so you're using, it's in the 20s, isn't it?
The last couple of years, we've been bumping up pretty close. We've been in the 50s, in the high 50s with our allocation numbers. So this has been really a blessing that what they have found has not only saved us money, it's reduced our allocation. We're looking at probably reducing our total nitrogen allocation, our discharge to the river next year to be well under that 50, probably the 40 number. So
well, the reason I was asking all that, not to belabor it, that hypothetically, if 2 years from now we need to expand the sewer plant, if we could prove those credits, so to speak, it might be beneficial to us in getting permitting. Whereas, Havelock ran into a lot of trouble trying to get permitting to expand their sewer plant. And I'm just saying that to say that kind of, nobody put a figure on it, but there's probably some intrinsic value for the system we have in place that has an asset value if you were going to go out and sell credits like you do with the power companies. But we're basically, it's an important thing to know from a strategic planning that at some future date when we are negotiating an expansion of that plant from 6 million or whatever, what's happening with our system is going to be very much to our benefit as far as getting permitting.
Yes, sir. The nitrogen discharge component of a future plant expansion will be the biggest hurdle to tackle is how do you come up with more allocation. So it will probably, there is excess allocation out there you can buy on the open market, let's say, between other municipalities that no longer need it. There are some municipalities that had large industrial bases that are no longer there, so they had excess nitrogen allocation that they may be willing to sell when you need it. The other option is you go to some highly advanced nitrogen removal techniques. So it's just another level of process at the plant. So that's one of those things you really evaluate very hard as you get into a PR, preliminary engineering report or study. When you look at your next plant expansion, you look at what type of process you want to put in place. You look at kind of cost benefit of continuing with the type of process we have now and buying additional nitrogen credit, or going through another level of advanced nitrogen removal at the plant. So what we're sending out the door is a smaller and smaller percentage of our effluent.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if that tied into where your staff found that savings or not today. If that's where they discovered that they were using excessive chemicals based on what they thought was 60,000, that was only 40. But that doesn't tie into that, does it?
Well, they're monitoring the concentration every day, and one of their goals was trying to reduce that nitrogen concentration going out. So what percentage of our effluent was actually considered nitrogen going out the door? And they were able to greatly reduce that and have a really stable number.
Is that where that savings was that you're talking about?
So we actually save in a couple of ways. We have a real live today savings of the treatment chemical, and we have a kind of in the bank savings of now we're sending less nitrogen out. So that gives us more capacity in our nitrogen discharge as we move forward and look at plant expansion in the future.
I'm just saying, in the bank is a bunch of money that you really seriously might could go to open market and sell that, but at some future date, it's going to be such a benefit as we want to expand.
Yeah, I would never sell anything we got because it will be high. When and if we need to do a plant expansion in the future, that will be our number one challenge is nitrogen credit.
Unless the technology changes and all that for now.
It could. It very well could. And I hope we're far enough down the road when we need the plant expansion that we moved into a new world of technology where they found a way to really get rid of it. All right, electric fund. Everything starts on the electric fund on page 249 with our anticipated revenues. And anticipated revenues are pretty much flat. A small uptick in basic customer service and our basic customer service fees and our fees for service in general across the board. A very small increase there is what we're projecting, and that's largely just to the growth on the system. We've seen about the same 2.5% or 3% in customer base growth in our electric that we're seeing in our water and sewer in the last few years. On page 250, we'll note one big number in fund balance appropriated. That is for a large capital project in our power supply division. We're looking at paying for with cash. We need to replace the transformers at our Trent Road substation. They're 1960s vintage. We've pretty much done everything we can to maintain those, test them, continually rebuild, to get as much life out of those transformers as we can. However, at this point, it's a very critical part of our power supply and power distribution network, and we need to look at replacing the transformer at that substation.
Are you looking at any engineering costs in this budget for, I know you're looking at another substation in the western part of the city. Is that in any way in the budget?
We are looking at kind of a long range and then an extra long range. Long range would be, near-term long range would be a new substation on the southeast part of town, County Line Road.
Okay.
With the growth and development in that area, the backside of Caroline Colors and Blue Water Rise, as well as the customer base that continues out the city limits going down towards Havelock. At some point, we will need another substation there. We're already working with Warehouse. We're looking at some property options over there. And then the same on the western side of town. As we continue to grow and develop on the western side of town with the West New Bern development and some of the proposed development along the expanded 43 corridor, we've already got plans in place. We've already got land kind of carved out for a future substation. That's pretty easy because the Duke transmission line is right there along Highway 43. One of the well lots we bought years ago for one of our water treatment plant wells, we bought an additional piece of property right beside it from Warehouse to make sure we had enough room for a substation if and when it would be needed in the future. So as we continue to grow in those areas, we're well aware of our capacity needs, and we're working with property owners, working with some long-range plans to make sure we have everything in place. And when that development gets there, we've got the water, sewer, and power capacity to accommodate it.
And on our peak demand, I know, Mr. Stevens, you mentioned a while ago a couple of new generators that are actually being used at peak demand for load management. Under that buyout, did that eliminate that preclusion from how much generation a city could do? Because, we were limited under that agreement that we couldn't.
There's still contractual limitations as far as what we can do with regards to load management. They did allow the electric cities as a whole to install an additional, forgive me, the 18, I think it is, Jordan, is that right? 18 megawatts or so of generation that we can help offset some of our peak demand as an organization, as the electric cities organization. But I don't know that we specifically benefited contractually wise any more from the asset sale than we were before.
I think I remember Mr. Wren saying that we were kind of maxed out as to how much additional load management generation we could do. I didn't know if that changed under the buyout or not.
I think we do have a little bit of capacity.
there's a little bit.
It's just finding a customer at this point. So you're
Right.
looking at somebody that's a large electric user, grocery stores and small industrial, stuff like that really come online to help us out. We do have a little bit of capacity and just waiting for, I think, the right customer to try to fill out that capacity. But it is very limited. We are near the upper end of what we can do with load management with our generation side, and continue to expand as much as possible through our distributed load generation with the switches on homes. It's been a tremendous part of the program, and trying to keep electric rates low as possible. We'll continue to move forward in that in every effort we can. All right, the first of the electric operational divisions is electric administration. Pretty status quo from the last few years. No major changes across this. This is simply our utilities director and his support staff with the engineering and administrative functions of the electric department. It's on page 253. You'll see there, like I say, pretty status quo in the operations and the personnel side. You will see a pretty good jump in the operations. We have a higher number than normal in the professional services, and this is essentially through some of the staff transitions and changes we've been going through the last year or so. We've been leaning on one of our electric consultants pretty heavily to help us with some planning efforts and some design. So we'll probably look at continuing that at least through the next year as we get some of that more of that key staff in place. So we've got a little higher number than normal in our electric professional services to keep some support from our consultant.
What's the jump in salaries on page 254?
Mm-hmm.
Why
It's
we
actually
don't-
a
okay,
reduction.
So because we don't have a utilities director at the
Yeah, so
end of
the
this
estimated and the budgeted, so estimated this year, we've got a couple of key positions that are currently vacant. As you know, anticipate certainly filling those in the next budget year. So as those positions fill, we kind of budget for a full staff.
What is your storm contingency? Where is that? Do you have one?
A storm contingency?
Yeah. I mean, for major
A
hurricanes.
fund
like
balance.
this.
That's
Just
the days cash on
days
hand.
cash on hand. We don't have a specific line item or anything for storm contingency.
Well, I mean, wouldn't that, seriously, if we had a $200,000 cleanup on the power end, wouldn't that substantially affect days on market?
$200,000? Not really.
No. Okay.
Hurricane Irene cost electric 1.2.
Of course, I
Sticking in
know
my
you'll
head for
get
some reason.
you get a lot of reimbursement on that, but I'm just talking about for the 90 days out or whatever.
Yeah, our significant liability or loss would be is if we were to have an event that caused some damage here but didn't meet the thresholds as a declared storm. But it'd have to be an anomaly for that to happen.
I'm just saying, if you had a major storm and you had more building damage, that would be general fund than enterprise damage, which would be power lines.
Sure.
If it were power lines, you just mentioned general fund. You can't necessarily go.
I'm talking about anything,
Right.
electric, whatever. It's going to be days cash on hand that it would come from. But ultimately, that's the reason why you have the days cash on hand. That's the reason why you have fund balance.
What is
with
cash on hand for electric right now?
120 some days.
125 roughly.
What is the amount there?
Oh, God.
Just ballpark.
Well,
I'd-
50, a third of 55 million. So
Okay, that's good.
um,
That's a good figure. I got you.
Somewhere just south of 20 million, I think. Ish.
Mr. Stevens,
Okay.
you want to update us? Are we close to getting a utility director?
we're working on it.
Still don't have one yet.
I'd prefer not to really kind of discuss it here, but we're working.
Okay, I'm just curious because, we're paying a consultant and taking the spot, our top 3 positions are empty based on what I'm seeing in the budget books. Our 3 top people are not there. Would we be better off to get a consulting firm to bring people in if we can't find somebody or wherever we're at? Because we're spending this money on consultants to do the job. I mean, and also too.
I disagree with that. We are paying the consultants to do a cost of service study so that we can analyze our rates to ensure that our customers are being charged appropriately based on the class that they're in. And I'm confident in Mr. Hughes' position right now and what he's doing. Now, granted, can we go long-term with that? No. And I can assure you that we're working on it. We have had one round of interviews that resulted in us needing to have a second round of interviews. And I'm not going to settle for somebody. So we're working on it. And I will update you offline if that's okay.
Yeah, no problems. I just, I mean, I didn't need specifics. Just say, we made an offer, we haven't made an offer, we're working on it.
Honestly, I'd prefer not to say.
Okay. So now has Jordan's salary been apportioned? So he's got some in this electric budget, some in the water, some in the sewer. How are you working that? Because obviously he's transcending these.
I don't think we allocated it.
I think we just,
It's pretty much allocated right now to his salary, the kind of adjustment I think we.
Is all in water?
it's all in the water.
Yeah.
So none of that's in.
Or water and sewer. It's
Water.
split by
Right, but I'm saying none of that is in this electric. So what you have here is, so above the 250, which we spent, is probably the three top positions, or the top and a one, maybe, because I know with the, retirements.
Just as a note, I have been in multiple organizations that have split FTE across funding departments, and it is just a complete nightmare. So it's much cleaner and easier to fund it in one place as long as it makes sense to do so.
Well, yeah, I just didn't know if you could take money from the electric budget and put it over there, or, with these enterprise funds. I'm just not sure how all that works. That's why I'm asking the question.
Generally speaking, it's utilized, it's through the shared services is where that stuff is done. But if it's an interim basis, oftentimes we just absorb it.
all right. The next operational division is our distribution O&M, page 262. Once again, a pretty status quo operational budget for these guys. We have carrying about the same levels of capital we have for some of the previous years, and some of our major capital items and cables and devices and overhead transformers, poles, fixtures, things of that nature. We do work pretty closely with our development community because a lot of these capital items will vary from year to year depending on new construction. So we try to stay abreast of the development community's plans for moving and growing. That way we make sure we're budgeting appropriately to put in new underground infrastructure, transformers, street lights, things of that nature as we move from year to year.
I know some years ago we had a lot of concern about idle facility charges, and I know we're much better on that, but do you feel comfortable with the present inventory levels of the department? And
yeah, it's a tough one, and when you go through a spot like we went through with the recession, going back several years ago, the idle facility becomes a reality where you go out and you string out, several $100,000 worth of infrastructure to serve a new community, and then the housing market flattens out, and now you're not getting new customers. You've got all the infrastructure sitting out there, no way to recoup that initial investment. There's just not a good way to do that. You come up with a fee and a charge that really I think would be counter in a time that development and growth is struggling. If you tried to recoup that from the developers, now you've got a new fee and a charge that I think would be counterproductive for development and growth, which is certainly not what we want in New Bern. So at the end of the day, we will eventually recoup those initial investments. It's just when you get in a period like we went through from, 08 to 2013, 2014, where everything's essentially flat, it just takes longer to recoup that initial investment. Now that things are growing, as we're putting infrastructure in, you're adding homes really just as quick as we can get the infrastructure in. We're hooking up new customers. We're recouping that initial investment fairly quick.
so I know you're keeping on top of, like, if you saw a major development coming in, instead of having to wait 120 days on a transformer or something, you keep that in inventory?
Yes, sir. And we try to stay, like I said, we try to stay as connected as we can with the developer. So we want to know, Mr. Developer, are you planning on doing another 40 lots next year? Are you planning on doing another 80 lots? What are your plans? So we try to coordinate with all these guys so we know exactly what their plan is for next year. So we make sure we've got everything we need. We're budgeting for the infrastructure so we can get it out there ahead of them. And that way, when they're ready to hook a new house, that we got all the infrastructure there, it's ready to go. You'll see these numbers really, a lot of these capital numbers will vary a lot from year to year too, and that's largely what's driving that. We have a kind of a flat line number in the background for replacement of poles and fixtures and things of that nature. As we're moving through the year, we do a certain amount of just replacement rehab, but the big ups and downs you see are really development driven. And in some years you will have a lot, and then you may not have a lot for a couple of years. As an example, say you put in a new subdivision with 120 lots. You got to get all that electric infrastructure in year one, and then it may take them the next 3 or 4 years to actually build out lots. So you got a huge increase in the number going in year one, and then you won't see that number for the next 2 or 3 years. So these numbers ebb and flow, and largely due to increases in development.
All right, so Jordan, the number that I see here, where it was 80,000 last year for street light fixtures, is now 200,000 this year. Is that because you've got a subdivision coming online, or what's the deal
That's
there?
actually a different that's an actually different reason and a good reason. If you actually look above that, midway through the next column up, there's a street lighting line item, 74489.
7, 4.
About midway of the same
Oh, yeah,
page.
well, that's what I didn't understand, because that
That-
went from 65 to 25, and I didn't
Okay.
understand that
So what
either.
we're doing there, the first line item is repair and replacement of fixtures. So if we see the street light out, we put a new lamp, we put a new ballast in. That number is going down. The new fixture cost is going up. What we're doing is basically we will no longer repair or replace incandescent or metal halide, high pressure sodium, any of our old traditional lamps. We're going to go completely LED with everything. So instead of the guys taking the time to replace a ballast, put a new lamp in, if we have a street light that's out, it will get a brand new equivalent LED fixture. And we've also put enough money in there to light up our major corridors this calendar year. I mean, this budget year. So we will go through and do a wholesale replacement, LED replacement, street lighting replacement of our major corridors. So Noose Boulevard, Glen Burnie, Racetrack Road, Trent Road, the loop around to Taberna Circle, Waterscape Way, Landscape. So most of our main travel corridors through our residentials, back Oaks Road. I'm missing some roads here, so we'll have a presentation to come this summer with some map to highlight all this. But we put enough money in here to get about a third of our street lights, a little less than a third of them, with this first year, with the plans to continue this program moving forward. The cost of the street lights, the LEDs have finally got to a point now where it's good. It's a good business decision to pull the trigger. You get a kind of you'll get your money back and save electric costs and power consumption costs in about 4.5 years on most of these now. So the power consumption cost has always been there as a reduction. However, the cost of the LED fixtures was quite expensive 4 or 5 years ago. Now that LEDs have become more prevalent, you've got more competition, more people making them, the cost has gone down. So now it's time for us to just move into the LED world.
I have a silly question. When you replace them, what do we do with the old streetlights? Do we scrap them and get money back for the
Scrap metal. We
Okay.
do a scrap metal collection now every couple of weeks for various components.
Jordan, so we don't have to run out here and retrofit things 3 or 4 years later on. Them LEDs, are we being careful about that high blue content that you're hearing about?
We're getting a color range. So you got a color range that goes from about 2,500K, which is 2,500K is a very yellow light, probably very similar to what's in the bulbs here, up to about a 7,500K. 7,500 is operating room white. It is bright as it gets. A lot of the first LEDs we saw came out in the 5,000 range, a real bright white. Today, what the industry has kind of settled on is about a 3,500K is the appropriate color range to get you a nice warm light. And I'll be honest, you really don't know a lot of difference between those and the traditionals. But and a lot of those actually have a way to dial that in. So the driver that actually the computer portion of the LED light, a lot of those are adjustable now, so you can actually adjust that color range at the light, at the fixture.
Oh, wow.
Hey, is the cost, just this is an aside, the cost of the lights like we have downtown, those old-looking poles and we put them down the middle of Gant, what I'm talking about, has the cost of those come down any?
Pretty much across the board. LED technology is
But I mean, the fixture I'm talking about.
The fixtures have across the board. Almost everything we buy now, the cost continues to go down just a little bit every year, just because of the competition. There's more and more people continuing to make them. So, and really, the industry is kind of phasing out the traditional light. In 10 more years, you'd be hard pressed to buy a traditional lamp.
I don't know that the pole's any cheaper though.
Well, that's what I was saying, because it's, my DeGraff and Reed neighborhood, they're still mad because they want fixtures like Ghent has, like downtown has. You know, we tried to offer them that solution, 6-7 years ago, and they didn't like that. They want the other one, so I'm just curious if the
Yeah,
prices
Mr.
come
Stevens
down.
is right, and unfortunately, while the cost of the
That's why I said the
technology,
fixture.
the light on the top is actually going down. I would feel safe to say the actual cost of the pole is probably continuing to creep up a little bit every year.
They continue to ask me about that, so.
But compared to what we could have got an LED fixture for, is even just 5 years ago, it seemed like an incredible deal today compared to what it was back then. So it's great to see that's going that way, because that helps us out across the board. It makes the power consumption less, the cost to operate them is less, cost to maintain them is even less. There's less moving parts to them. So you don't have lamps, you don't have valves to replace. It works very well. So we're very happy. And that's why you see those two, the one decrease and the one increase. We're going to quit fixing them, and we're going to start replacing them with LEDs.
Okay, thank you.
And where you're going to see a significant benefit of that is something that y'all brought up yesterday, which is in the streets budget for electricity for street lighting. So as that implementation happens, you're going to see significant reductions in what that cost is from the cost of the
Yeah, so one of the things we'll look at this summer, as we get into more and more LED fixtures, we will have to come back and do kind of right now we're just basically using equivalent on our fee schedule. So if we take a 150 watt, what was a 150 watt light, and we replace it with the equivalent LED, we're still using the same charge. We need to really update and revise our schedule of fees for street lighting and area lighting in general to reflect our practices moving forward. So that's something we'll be working on this summer to bring to the board for some discussion and some recommendations moving forward. Also something that, as Mr. Stevens mentioned, that's something our consultants helping us work on, that cost of service. They'll be looking at some of our street lighting numbers as well.
Jordan, over on your professional services, that $85,000, is that for maintenance of some of the mechanical equipment?
Most of the professional services you see in here are the electrical engineering professional services.
Okay.
This is also where we've got our one main electrical consultant doing a lot of work for us.
So he's charged, you're paying him from the two different budgets, the same person, but two different budgets?
Same firm, but they're doing a lot of different work for us. So you've got the cost of service study. We're working on long-range planning, something we haven't had for the electric utility, trying to make sure that we're capturing our capacity needs, that we don't miss the window. Electric infrastructure isn't something you go out there and say, man, we really need that. We got to get in there next month. A lot of the lead times on these components are 12 to 18 to 24 months. So it takes a lot. If you know you're going to need something in 2020, you need to be buying it today type deal. So long-range planning is critical with our electric, especially on the capacity side of it. We're also, due to some of the highway work going on right now, we've got a lot of work we wouldn't traditionally have with the 43 project and all the work along 70 through James City and High Block, the Slocum connector, the High Block bypass. All of these have relocation work that's got to be coordinated with DOT. We've historically used the same consultant to do our relocation work for us. We just normally don't have much of that going on. Right now it seems like we went from nothing in the relocation world to half a dozen different projects all at the same time. But it's mainly just because of all the work DOT's got going on in the area.
Is there any reason why we don't hire individuals to do this, or is it?
Well, it ebbs and flows. That's the problem. If you brought in an engineer just to do like the relocation work for you, they'd be a great asset today. In 2 years, you may not need them. So that's where it's smart to use your consultants. So you try to have a baseline of work that your staff can handle. So our staff is doing our subdivision layouts, trying to figure out what we need with system replacements, new installs, underground, overhead underground conversions that we do in-house. Where you try to reach out to consultants, it's the stuff that you won't do day to day. So the DOT relocations, like I said, in the last 3 or 4 years, you could probably have 1 or 2 of those total. And now this year we've got half a dozen going on at the same time.
So right now we just have one electrical engineer on staff, correct? Is that
we have an electrical engineering technician on staff.
Technician, but not electrical engineer.
So this is not a flat rate. This is estimate per.
There is no flat. Yeah, so we basically we have a schedule of per hour schedule of fees that we pay them. So however much work we need them to do is what the total bill ends up being. And I think that's about it on the distribution. No real changes in personnel. Everything stays the same there. On the distribution side.
Jordan, how are you on your contracted help for hurricane preparedness for this year?
Mike's starting to pull all that stuff together right now to go ahead and get our traditional, we have our mutual aid agreements, but we also try to reach out and have annual contracts with trimming crews as well as food service and bunk houses if needed. Most of those are Alabama, Florida, Mississippi. It seems like we're going to get all of the major vendors for those out over the last few years. But yeah, we'll get to the point where we kind of dust those off and get somebody set up for hurricane season.
Have you looked at predictions this year?
12 to 13, it's always about the same, 12 to 13. Yeah,
Slightly increased, yeah.
It's,
I
we
just don't
went
want the
ahead,
antithesis of the 5-degree weather to the.
Yeah, how about it?
as part of the budget process this year, we went ahead and canceled any inclement weather during hurricane season.
Good job.
It's nice of you.
That will rate you right up along with the guys that changed the nitrogen stuff.
You never know. We may get very lucky, or we may have a rough year. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. Page 271, I think, will start our off again. 274. I'm sorry. Page 274 will start our power supply. This is the big one. This is the one you see the biggest dollar amount in, and largely that is just our power supply, our wholesale power supply from Duke through McKempa. So the biggest number in here is essentially that one line item which purchases our power for resale. We do have one add. This is the one add to all the utilities. We have a net gain in our electric of one position. We're adding a substation tech one position here. This is kind of a dual role position. This will serve as we need some help in our substations. As they're getting older, there's a lot more maintenance work to do in our substations. We're currently being done by just a couple of people. So this is a way to kind of train somebody new to come in and start learning that skill set. At the same time, that we utilize this position to help out with our load management installs. So this is where we're putting our load management switches into the homes. There's a lot of that to do with the AMI conversion, going from our old one-way switches to new two-way switches that can talk back and forth that are more beneficial for us. The problem with that is, it's a very slow process. The more we can do, the quicker we can get done, and realize the benefit of having everything fully functional with the on-site load management. So this position will be kind of serving a dual purpose and doing substation work as well as doing load management work for us. And as we discussed before, we've got the $1 million in there for the replacement of the Trent Road substation transformer. Any questions on power supply?
Jordan, what is the callback on the, let's see, the last the last 5 numbers is 61141.
So callback essentially in any of the operational divisions, this is where the guy is, he's left for the day, he's at home, and we call and say, hey, we got a problem, you got to come in right now. With the substations, that happens a lot for a small number of guys because you only had a couple of guys that work on the substations. And anytime we have a major power outage, there's a lot that needs to happen at the substations. We have a couple of guys that are here pretty regular anytime we have a power outage to make sure that the appropriate things are happening through the substation, make sure there's no damage if it was a lightning strike, and try to get everybody back online as quick as possible. But just in general, that's what the callback is for. So somebody's essentially gone home for the day, they're sitting at home, and hey, we got a problem, we need you back today, come on back. Some divisions more than others, just depending on the function and role they serve. Any other questions on power supply? All right. If not, I think JR's got the next one, communication controls. I'm sorry, one more. Communication controls. This is our call center, our 24/7 call center for any of our utility-related outages or emergencies, as well as this kind of becomes a one-stop shop for anybody that's got a problem after hours on the weekends. They seem to route them through here. Nothing major changing personnel-wise, same number of staff. A couple of increases operationally. We have some capital that's needed for replacement of some IT infrastructure, as well as some increase in our service and maintenance contracts for some of our newer technologies, our data voice that runs our IVR, our OMS, our outage management system.
JR, I'm just, because we had such a large discussion yesterday on communication centers or comm centers. This is different from the police comm center, correct?
That is absolutely
So
correct.
this is, I wonder, can these people answer for the other one too? Because, we were worried that we didn't have enough people. This is just having to do with electric, correct?
Well, electric, water, and sewer, they monitor, they do 24/7 monitoring of all of our water, sewer, and electric infrastructure. So there, it's a wall of computer screens where they're watching all the time to make sure none of the little red lights flash, all the numbers and the
Well,
parameters.
I was firsthand saw that night we were at the Ghent meeting, and your screen came up, and all of a sudden the red came
Yep.
everywhere. We knew there was a power outage. It's pretty interesting to see
And
how that
it
flashes.
gets pretty hectic in there. When
Yeah.
you've got a power outage, a lot of things are going on. They're trying to monitor, communicate with the guys in the field. They're also fielding calls coming in from customers. You've got water and sewer systems that'll start shutting down as they lose power. They're trying to communicate that to the appropriate field staff. So it becomes a much like a regular 911 center. It can go from a very calm place to a very hectic place very quick.
The $22,000 for overtime, is that for like during storms?
It's
for instance?
scheduled overtime, most of it. The way they work in shifts, you end up with scheduled overtime in the shift because it's a 24/7 operation.
What, do they work 12-hour shifts
They
or?
work 12-hour shifts.
Is this gonna be better when the new, system rolls out, or?
The functionality of this group has increased tremendously with the rollout of AMI. Not so much the meters themselves, but the kind of piggyback technologies that we're able to go with AMI. So now that AMI is in place, and it opens the door for our OMS, our outage management system, our IVR that handles some of the phone calls. So yeah, the AMI was the foundation for a lot of efficiencies and improvements here. And the customer experience will continue to improve with this as well. So the old adage was you called, and you were very lucky if you got to talk to anybody during a power outage because of
Oh,
just
yeah,
the,
you get that automated.
if you were lucky if you could ever, we only have a certain number of phone lines that would jam up, and you're lucky if you got anything accomplished. With the new system, we have a way the IVR, once the outage is identified for a certain area, we say the AMI will tell us, the system will tell us, hey, there's an outage here. The IVR system recognizes that and starts catching incoming calls and says, we know the power outage is in your area. We can also tailor restoration messages to say,
Oh, okay.
we know that the outage is out in your area, and we anticipate restoration in the next 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever. We can tailor that message to whatever we identify the problem to be.
Yeah, that's good.
So we've got a call center that we hope we never have to use again, knock on wood. So, any questions about communications control? All right, now it's JR. Last division of the electric is our utility business office.
All right, kind of dive in through this fairly quickly, but somewhat quickly. We just like a lot of the other divisions in electric, we don't have any personnel changes that we're looking at. The big highlight related to this is we're looking to hopefully finish up our AMI during this fiscal year. We are requesting to continue to maintain the temporary help services line. That should get us through the completion of that install, along with completing or assisting water resources in any completion that they may need to, any additional completion items that they may have to get that project finalized. Once that's done, then that temporary health services line will reduce dramatically. We still probably intend to maintain it in a small amount in future years as needed, but for the most part, it'll mainly go away. Through one of the big changes, particularly related to our service and maintenance contracts, is we're looking at about 8 months, estimated 8 months worth of utilization for our prepay system. As you've all noted, has been noted in the past, the prepay system is somewhat costly, so it's depending on whether or not the board wishes to move forward with that system or not. Included in the budget, including the budget on that's about $82,000 related to that prepay system. Like I said, that's 8 months. That includes configuration and operation maintenance. I believe that was a 5% utilization, so that was a little bit high, probably a little bit high in terms of utilization to start out. But we wanted to estimate a little higher than what we needed, just in case. Also, as part of that, going down a little bit further, down to line 73840, which is our merchant services credit card fees, that assumes that we will be absorbing those credit card fees. Currently, we are absorbing them for our test group, and so that assumes we'll continue that process to absorb those fees for our customers going forward, and it just absorbs as part of our rate going forward.
Gerald,
Yes, sir.
I hear a lot of individuals tell me that it's very expensive to use your credit card to pay your bill.
Yes, sir. Sir, I believe it is $4.99 to pay with a credit card online. That is not a fee the city of New Bern receives. That's a convenience fee that's charged by the company that we're utilizing.
Okay.
That is not that amount of money is not an unusual amount. However, what we've got going forward is what we would anticipate people doing is rather than utilizing that service, they would more than likely switch over to the prepay where we would be absorbing those fees.
Tara, why don't we work through a bank to have our own credit card processing? Is there a reason?
Several years ago, it was one of those things where it was where I believe previous directors and previous managers felt that it was the cost associated with that was too high. We actually have our bill pay vendor actually provides that service for us as part of our activities with them, as part of our contract with them. So we send our bills to them. They put everything out online for us. You can pay through them, and you can go back and see 13 months worth of your historical bills and that sort of thing. So it's part of our contract with that vendor. So.
Is it any way that you can source that out to another vendor to see if it would be cheaper?
We could look into that. We can always look into that. As of right now, since we're looking at changing our financial system, it's probably better to wait until after we get that. It's going to be better to wait until after we get a new CIS in place to do that service because at the time when we do that, we may decide that we want to just absorb all the fees and let people pay the credit card online, just to encourage them to do that. It's an easier, more secure way and less cash handling for staff. So I think that the more we can entice people to pay ACH, credit card, that sort of thing, makes our lives easier.
And another thing, in the last meeting we had, you shared with us that we have been recouping some of the money that we turned the folks in that owes money.
Yes, sir.
So how much are we actually writing off of him?
I had that number as far as that presentation, and I apologize, I don't have it off the top of my head. The numbers, Alderman McKenzie, to generally answer your question, the number has decreased significantly over the last few years. But again, like I said, I don't have it off the top of my head.
Did see it somewhere. I thought it was in here. Wouldn't it show you the amount of deposits over the last couple of years that you've taken in late fees? I mean, late fees and charges, wouldn't that be in your electric fund, under revenues?
That's part of the revenues of the electric fund itself. It's also that's also spread. Late fees and other charges are part of the other part of the revenues of the water, sewer, and electric as well.
So I don't know, in 2016, we collected over $1 million, but we had 466 in late penalties and 610,000 plus in delinquent fees. So that's a little over $1 million, and we're projecting 975,000 this year less collecting in fees.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still got fees. Yeah, I mean, it's still out there. We're
It's
collecting.
still out there.
People are still late.
I'm pulling up that presentation so I can just give you the numbers. Alderman McKenzie, the net write-offs for fiscal year 2017 is about $167,000. So that's the actual write-offs of $312,000. We've had collections of $144,000. So net write-offs of about $168,000.
Thank you.
Well, apologize for not having that number offhand. I should have pulled it up.
Is that everything for utility business owners? Any other questions?
What else do we have today, sir?
That's all we have. I think it covers all the different departments of the budget, divisions of the budget, that unless the board has any other questions. And obviously, you've got public comment.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I apologize for not being here yesterday, but had some family emergencies out of state. I want to ask a question here. It was in general administration, where's page 25. Special appropriations,
Okay.
line item 76-135.
Okay.
Could you explain that community development for me? I know it says funds for special projects, so that may arise during budget years.
Sure. Yeah, that's traditionally been a place where there are some items that may come up throughout the year that are community development related. That's kind of utilized at the discretion of the board and the city manager. So mostly authorized by me. So it could be any number of things that could come up. And I think one year, Mayor, if you were, I think, did we use some of the money for the Paint Your Heart Out to help make them whole with the Paint Your Heart Out, as well as the NRCDC, who was doing the additional program along with the Paint Your Heart Out. So there's different utilizations, and I'm happy to go back through the accounting year to year and provide you maybe several years worth of what it was spent on, if that's.
It was one year was lunch for the Newbern High School football team. With
Yeah,
the
it's a parade for the championship.
So if I come to you and say, well, Mark, can you help me out with, I want to do something for my senior citizens, and I give you my plan of what I want to do. So that's what you're saying, if you and the board felt like that was necessary, you would accommodate me with that from these funds? Is that what you're?
I think, yeah, I mean, unless we wanted to approach it, I mean, ultimately, I'm going to come ask the board on most cases. But there may be some issues where you may want to bring it up to your constituents to just do an amendment of the budget to provide those funds for that particular purpose.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then I had another question. We are up here on the classification pay plan, fiscal year, up at the front of your book. I saw you have your grades and titles and the minimum to maximum for pay for each department within the city, but I didn't see here where it says, it showed the city manager's salary here.
City manager's salary is determined based on a contract by the board. So it wouldn't be specific to or on this particular pay plan schedule.
So shouldn't we have something in him, since we're gonna be transparent here, so we have something here in this budget showing some type of pay scale? Is that something that's not required?
I don't know that there is a pay
Well,
scale.
But I mean, it's
Public
I know it's public
information.
information, so that's something.
My salary is public information. It
Okay.
gets posted in, it gets posted in the newspaper all
I
the
think
time.
Okay.
So
every year in the Sun Journal,
Yeah.
it gets in there. It's
I know it's
public.
public information, I've seen it before, but I was just wondering why it wasn't here with all the other classifications.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, I don't.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks, Jordan.
I guess you're
Anybody
you're a
that we
contract
pay-
employee like Scott, so Scott doesn't.
that's right. It's a contract employee, so it's different than a classification pay plan for the employees. But I mean, I don't know if it would be that big a deal. I don't know. We'd have to look at it. So I'm more than happy to look to what some other cities do.
And I had one other, but that was answered, so that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
Mayor, I would like to mention or see what the board's idea is that right now we are scheduled for a public hearing for this budget on Tuesday night. I don't believe we're ready. I believe we've got a parking lot to drive into and discuss. So I guess at this meeting, can we call for another workshop, ask that that be removed from the agenda for Tuesday night, and then schedule another workshop? Because I would hate for our citizens to come here Tuesday night expecting to talk about a budget that may change. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there for discussion amongst the board members.
I agree.
Do we have dates? I had a death in the family, so at a moment's notice, I'm out of here, and it's important to me, so I would want to be at the meeting. So how soon can we schedule it?
How much notice do we
I'll
have
be
to give?
doing next week.
48
so
hours, so can we do Monday?
Continue this meeting.
Yeah, that's correct.
So can we continue and come back tomorrow?
Can't post,
Can we
got to
come?
advertise it.
No, he said we can continue.
Oh,
If you recess this and do a continuance, I don't think you need the advertising.
So-
You just need to establish when you're going to do it.
What about Friday?
I can't do Friday. I can't do tomorrow.
You said you can't do tomorrow?
I can't do tomorrow, Friday.
I can't do next week.
Before we get into a date, let me ask the board this. I think that the staff, so that they can be adequately prepared for any questions, what I've gotten out of this budget is that I think that the manager has, correct me if I'm wrong, $200,000 contingency. And the possibility of, if the board so chose to make the garbage system more equitable and we quit subsidizing it, there could be potentially $250,000, $206,000 there. So without going into other sources like stormwater rate increases or tax rate increases, that's the revenue end of a pretty reasonable way of getting a little bit of money in. We've not talked much about, for the following year, Oaks Road, Old Airport Road, and Trent Road. We're still working on an engineer, but I would ballpark guesstimate $4.5 million by the time you do all them. Again, correct me if I'm wrong on this. So I want to make sure before we set a date, and because we don't have to do this before June 30th, that this is a very pinnacle year of activity in the city, that we give staff direction as to what the consensus of the board is and what research they need to do to come back and give us the answers so we can move along. We've been talking about from 0 to 12 firemen. And we had the issue of the traffic patterns in James City and the isolation of that whole area over there. So again, those are things that in the ensuing year you maybe can make budget adjustments on, but it might, I'd hate to see on some big issue that you had to actually go through the LGC for approval of major budget adjustments if you did it. So again, I'm just throwing that out. Others might have other comments like mine. So I don't really know where the board is as to where some of these items are. I know that, well, I'll leave that open for some more ideas as to what information that the staff needs to have ready for this board to decide on those issues that are germane to this budget for.
Well, the next meeting after the 8th is what, the 22nd? So we wouldn't be able to have a public hearing until the 22nd anyway, so it does give us a few weeks
But
to meet and give you a week off.
well, I just want to know because we still need to talk about. There's a few board members that want to discuss employee raises and how we're going to do that structure, and that that's a meeting in itself. And then we, you know what I'm saying, we still have the fine tune stuff. I feel like I don't want to kick things down the road, and when like with Chief, he said maybe 6. So I was under the impression in previous conversations that we may be looking to see how much we can get in a loan and take out debt service to do a lot of projects get everything up to par, and then moving forward in budget seasons, we'll be maintaining. Like, this could be the year where, we try and get as much stuff done that is a necessity that we can, and moving forward, we're maintaining what's going on in the city, because obviously from hearing from the department heads, we're lacking in a lot of areas, and we're kind of just moving things around. We need to fix the situation and go from there. That's my comment.
Yep. I think that the city, however it happened, for the betterment of the citizenry, the Oaks Road, the Trent Road, and the Old Airport Road are just very important items, and they're all hitting us at one time. They're going to have to be, in my opinion, bundled up into an installment loan. I think that outside of what the board wants to do, if it wants to entertain the idea of additional firemen, I think anything on top of those 3 roads and possibly some new firemen and maybe a little bit of whatever you're talking about might be incorporated with the contingency factor and the adjustment in the garbage rates. But I think that if you are aggressively looking at a $10 or $11 million bundle package of goods for the city, I think you're looking at some major tax increase.
Well, we're thinking 2 cents. If I would be willing to look at a 2-cent tax increase if it was for many things, if we did some major infrastructure projects, such as water and sewer. I'm not talking about pretty, so I would take the Martin Marietta out of that, but I would do major infrastructure needs, such as the roads you're talking about, some sewer improvements, things that we need to do that are major infrastructure. I don't want to just raise the tax 2 cents to do one project. I want to do many projects. If that'll get us $10, $12 million, then I'm ready to look at that and would be in favor of that, because then that's going to free up some of the money that we're using. That would be enough to pay the debt service, that additional tax intake. Then it would free up the money we're using in our regular budget every year, maybe to do some of these other projects, such as more firemen, such as additional workers that we've talked about or whatever.
Or in merit increase.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's take a moment and go through the aldermen, and so that the staff knows what you're dealing with. There's quite a divide, or there's quite a difference of opinion on the budget this year. Understandably, 4 new aldermen. So I think I'm going to concisely, just succinctly say that my idea is to get the garbage rates where they are, use the $200,000 contingency, do the Oaks Road, Trent Road, Old Airport Road improvement, possibly from 3 to 6 firemen. Look at that. That's my idea of where we are. So let's start with Alderman Bingle, and let's go down here, and then the staff will know what the board's thinking, and then we can set that date. Go ahead.
That's the way I feel. I like to see it bundled in a loan. I think there's some areas we need to massage in this current budget, looking at that, pulling out the money, but I would rather get the loan, get the big things done. I'm more concerned with the infrastructure right now. I also want to see a line item for redevelopment commission and put some funds in there, whether it's that $40,000 that he had, CDBG funds, whatever we need to do. Let's make that statement and put some money aside, because it's going to take a little bit of money to get us up and going. The ensuing years will take more, but those are some of the things that I would like to do.
Okay, so, and if any alderman wants to ask an alderman while they're doing their platform, what range of money are you talking about putting in that redevelopment commission? 50,000?
Well, I think there's already, he had $40,000 in his line item that said to forward the goals and objectives of the Board of Aldermen. So to me, that was a goal and objective of the Board of Aldermen. So I'd like to see that go in there, and if we, at least that amount, and then if we put CDBG funds or anything else, I think that would be helpful. So that's what I'm talking about.
Also, that $7,500 for the facade program, I thought that could also go in there, or either just eliminate altogether. I mean, that's...
Because we work towards those things.
So, and you're looking at the possibility of a 2-cent tax increase?
I'd be willing to go at least, no more than 2 cents. I would feel comfortable with 2-cent increase to get many projects, not... Any
other rate increases like...
I'm okay with the making the trash an enterprise fund. I'm good with that. I would support that. And I'm willing to talk about the stormwater fee going up to 90 cents, I don't think that would be such a burden, you know, $36 from $24. I think that I would be okay with that.
All right, Alderman Harris.
I agree with what she said. I feel like we need to go ahead and, at this point, try and lump a lot of things together so that moving forward, we can just maintain what we've done and, you know, pay it out through debt service. I mean, I think that's what needs to be done. Personally, we have a lot of projects that we want to do. We have a lot of visions from the strategic planning that some of it didn't even get touched on, but I feel like we need to, you know, work towards that. And I feel that at this point, we've done a great job as a city on keeping our rates low, but I would support, you know, going as high as 2 cents to, you know, get the funds to be able to take care of things that need to be taken care of so that we're not having to pull so much from different department heads, and we'll be able to fund more department heads on what they need based on employees, like the police are, you know, the police department where they only have 3 employees, but they may need 2 more for the you know, the telecommunications. I feel I don't want to be in a spot where they're making it work because you burn your employees out like that. That's even with the fire department. But you know, the morale, and then I'm in favor of trying to get our you know, our city employees, you know, a decent raise because we want them to stay. We have an issue with you know, turnover sometimes in departments, especially at the higher level, and we want to be competitive, and to do that, you have to offer these different, you know, things, so, you know.
Well, one thing that's not been discussed during the budget, and again, one reason I don't think we're ready to have a public hearing, is 2 retreats ago, we talked about simulation in the police department, and more so with neighborhood policing and situations like it happened in the last year, particularly the deputy that had some issues in Florida. I've never seen more of a need for a police simulator.
I think that's been resolved, though.
And well, yeah, but as far as the funding and how it pro-rata between different departments within the county itself, different municipalities,
I think the
et
community
cetera.
college is buying that.
Okay, but what amount of buy-in for the city on that?
Well, I think, I mean, I've been talking to the chief about it because I also supported it. And I think he's telling me that the community college, is that right, Chrissy? Do you know? The community college is buying it, and it would just be a part of the BLET and continuous education training.
So you think within the current police budget, he has sufficient funding and would not need an amendment at some future date during the year for that?
I don't think he's asked for it. I don't think because he hasn't asked
All
for
right,
it.
okay.
There's some devil in the details with that one. I think you know, they're looking at utilizing one of our facilities. It'd be my hopes that maybe offset some of our training costs with the utilization of our facility. Personally,
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to mention it because it's not been mentioned during the whole budget, and I think, you know, that's probably a pretty big deal in today's society that in anything that comes up, that there's a simulation to help train. Anything else, Alderman Harris?
That's all I have.
Alderman Astor.
I think first what I'd like to do is I'd like to see what we're looking at trying to bundle. You know, what items are we wanting to bundle, and will 1 cent or 2 cent on, you know, take care of it. Really, until we know what we're going to bundle, what projects we want to try to do this or next year, it's kind of hard for me to make a decision as to raise the taxes 1 cent or 2 cents until we see what the projects are. I am very much interested in, as you all know, I mean, I think for sure that we have to fund the 6 firefighters for over on the Thurman Road Station. I mean, you weren't here yesterday, Barbara, but you know, there was talking some you know, 10, 15, and you know, minute response times for second due over there coming from the headquarters station, and we've got to move to make that better. I mean, we've lost $2 million homes in the past couple of years over there. So you know, I want this facade problem or program for $7,500. I'd like to either see that move to the redevelopment commission or eliminate it altogether.
Well, I don't think we need to eliminate it. It's a benefit to the citizens.
Well, yeah, so is police and fire and trash pickup and everything else too, but it's what we can afford. You know, I'm looking at some of the budgets. There's some things down here that during this budget, we've all taken notes that we might want to talk to the manager about reducing some line items. You know, things that we think that we might be able to get by with and let them budget till next year. And I'm also for right away doing something with solid waste. I agree that you know, we need to let the customers pay for solid waste and not, you know, supplement it out of the general fund. And that's I think a $280,000 transfer now. Is that what you're talking? $280,000 right there.
Alderman Harris, we'll go ahead.
I was gonna just add in too that if you do lump in projects, you know, we do still have Martin Marietta, and if we were to do something where it was gonna generate revenue, that would be a benefit. If you're gonna put money into doing something like zip lining or whatever, and it's gonna be a fee associated with that, or if we third party that out contract, that's, if you fix it and you build it, that could be another source of revenue where if that money's coming in, that goes to general fund, right? It wouldn't go to specific. So, I mean, when you can bulk all this together and do a lot with it, we would come out on the
Well, I agree with you
Yeah.
on that, except I think what we should do is we should start immediately or as soon as we can and trying to find someone that will pick up that amphitheater, and we'll call it the Dana Outlaw Martin Marietta Amphitheater if he wants to pay for it. You know,
Right.
And let's at least, but there's some infrastructure issues that's gonna have to take place, I'm sure. But
and you gotta fund that.
but yeah, I agree. You know, but I would love to see that project move on. But I would also love to see it be a public-private partnership.
Right. But I'm
Yeah.
sure we have to pay in something to help get it to that process.
Well, I don't know. Depends on how bad Pepsi Cola might want to put their name out there.
Want to wait till y'all see how the Mumfest concert goes at Lawson Creek Park, and then you tell me what you think.
That we
That's
still
gonna be
need
a
Martin
big
Marietta.
conference.
Would the board want for staff to, before our next meeting to discuss budget, look at community block grants as to how much money can fuel redevelopment, or do we already know that? Is that something?
That's a Jeff question. That's a Jeff and Landon.
But I mean, is that
question.
something you want an answer to as far
I
as?
think we asked him
We
yesterday.
asked him that
He said,
yesterday.
yeah.
Well, okay. If you use that money and it's wrong, used wrong, you're gonna pay it back. So as long as is that,
We're
All
not
right.
using it.
Alderman Kinsey.
Well, infrastructure is something that I've been dealing with, and that's something that is very needed. And I echo off of Alderman Bingham that if we're gonna look at any projects, it's not doing just one, it's doing a handful of them to be able to show the strength and the endurance of what this board can do in making a final decision. Looking at the weakness that we have with staff, where we're weak at, where we can come in and bring them up to the standards that we need to be able to render the services that this city has. We're a great city. We just need to be stronger there and being able to meet the needs of the community.
Okay.
That's where I'm at. And, you know, because if you don't take care of the staff, they're not going to take care of you. You know, and I feel that that's something that we need to do. It's not that we need to micromanage them. It's just that we need to have strong bodies that can make a demand.
Yeah.
Just say, this is what we need to do, and if you don't do it, we see you later.
And
You know?
I'm very much interested in looking at providing raises for some staff.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's been long overdue.
You know, during the campaign trail, we have had
I mean,
complaints.
and that's something,
So-
that's something that I see that we need to do. I mean, if you got a strong leader, you got a strong team. But if you it's like going to the playoffs, okay? You see the same team goes there all the time. We're that team. Why don't we get a stronger player? We have a strong player right over there. His name is Mark Stevens. You know, we give him the orders, Mark will run with them.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Mark,
The only thing I'd say in a different to that is that if you have a good staff, a good workforce will make your leader look very good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
so we're ready to do so. That's where I'm.
Okay. Alderman Vance?
Well, to raise the taxes 2 cents, which is gonna generate, what, $614,000, something like that. And then you're gonna have an increase in sales tax and fee as well, revenue as well. But like Serena said, a portion of that is gonna go to the special district. Now, was that 2%, when you raised that 2% in taxes, was that just the total NB1 and SD2 tax, or that was just strictly NB1 tax?
I don't know what all exactly those
Oh,
acronyms
okay.
mean, but the ad valorem tax would go up.
So you say, when you say ad valorem, are you incorporating both of them together, the real personal and SD2?
Yes, any taxable amount.
Any taxable amount that
Yeah,
the city
yeah,
receives taxes on?
anything that any property taxes the city would levy, it's the
Okay.
same levy amount, so everything would go up.
Okay, well, my stand on that, 2 cents, that's not a lot of money to get a lot of projects done.
No,
But
that
use the
that
debt,
money,
it
that
would
money
pay.
would pay the debt service for any loan that we take. So if we take out a loan for $9 million and we have to pay every year,
600,000.
that covers that, and we had that $9 million to cover the projects that we lump up in one. Hypothetically, just,
Oh, okay.
it's a hypothetical number.
So, I thought this board had discussed in our work sessions about a bond. I mean, if you do the bond referendum, the taxes is gonna be raised anyway, but then you'll be allowed more money to borrow more money, correct?
I don't think so, no.
No?
Well, no, we did talk about the bond, but then we switched it and asked JR to find out how much we could get approved for as a city, and then go from there, so that.
Did we
once-
get those figures? I don't remember.
Yeah, we
You don't have
did.
the flexibility
He
with the
gave
bonds
us-
that you
You
do.
don't? You don't have to flex.
You don't have the flexibility, and the time element's got to be done within a certain period of time.
We'd have to know by June 1st in order for us to get and meet deadlines to be able to get it on the agenda, not to mention it goes on as votes, ballot, so that your constituents vote on it. So there may be some of the things that get voted yes, some of them may get voted no, and then, at that
And
point.
then there's the cost to the election, so by the time you pay the bid bond
And the bond attorney.
bond attorney, all that, you're talking $100,000 probably.
Easy.
Mr. JR, did you give us any information on how much we could get approved for, or was that just what Mark presented based on if we were to raise the taxes?
Yeah, that information, we had provided at one point, an amount, just basically, that if you take out a loan for this amount, it was gonna cost you this much per, X amount per year. Mark had given, Mark had provided that,
Provided in my presentation for the budget last board meeting.
So, okay, that's where it ended at, the $9 million.
And I mean, we can go up to as much as you want. I think, and I know Alderman Odom hasn't had an opportunity, and Alderman Best was still speaking, but I mean, I kind of almost agree. There's two ways of doing this. You can do it where you say, hey, Mark, here's your X amount of money based on the direction that y'all are kind of giving on what you're willing as a board to come to consensus at and generate revenue, or you can sit down and decide which projects you approve of and you want to consider, and then we can figure out what that sum of money is and how long we want to try to finance it, and then we say, okay, here's what the debt service is, this is how much money we need to be able to do it. Are you willing to do it? If not, we need to start culling the list down. That's kind of the two methodologies and way you can look at it.
Right.
But ultimately, we're going to have to sit down and we're going to have some discussions at whatever work session y'all want to do it, and figure out what's acceptable as far as the projects you want to do.
Okay, anything else, Alderman Best?
Yeah, I agree with that, Mark. We, finalize what projects we want to do, see what type of monies we talking about, and then, move forward and that way, if we need to increase the taxes even another 1 cent, I mean, it's to generate the money the revenue that we need.
I guess the difficult thing for us is I don't know whether it's a 1-6 vote or a 6-1 vote for Trent Road. And then if it's a fire station, it may be a 3-4 vote versus a 4-3. I have no idea. So as we go through that list, we're going to be able to get through some projects, and then at that point, I know what kind of sum of money I'm dealing with on the project
But I
side.
thought we kind of talked about that. I mean, if you take the top 10 things and give it to us and we'll check it off, I think we can make it
I agree,
easy.
but then we've also got that same amount of money that we're talking about here, and based on our list of checklist items, you've got 6 potential firemen, 1 animal control officer, 3 telecommunicators. So you're talking about 9 positions. There's your $500,000 at least. Stormwater potential, talked about potential rates. This is stuff in the parking lot. A community center, projects such as Old Airport Road, Trent Road, Oaks Road. Then you start getting into debt service that we're going to take out and do things. So ultimately, we're talking about a large sum of money annually that we're going to have to come to.
But I would not talk about any personnel would not be part of this loan discussion.
And I think we're already.
But it matters, because if I go take out $600,000 worth of loan to go do a project, yes, there may be some initial savings with deferred cost annually to go do these projects piece by piece by piece, but ultimately you're talking about a large debt service that would come online in next year's budget. As well as if you decide to do all these personnel decisions and everything else is coming along, that starts this year. So we've got $500,000 or $600,000 in personnel, and then next year we'll have another $400,000, $500,000 worth of debt service coming online. So you're talking about $1 million. So we've got to figure out where's that money coming from.
Mark.
And that's why I'm saying that's my job to figure out.
I understand.
I just need the board to figure out what they want to do, and then
Mark.
I'll report
Before we
back.
have any more discussion, I really think that Alderman Odom needs to have a chance to speak. Unfortunately, he got last in the pile.
Alderman Best, were you through, or you got anything else?
No.
Okay, Alderman Odom?
I think the manager hit on sort of what my train of thought was. You've got projects, then you've got recurring annual expenses. A 2.5% merit increase, JR, you told me yesterday, was how much?
$400,000.
$408,000.
Yeah.
So if you do a 2.5% merit increase this year, that $408,000 is going to be there next year with another increase on top of that. You're adding personnel, same thing. You've got salaries, you've got benefits. All that is, it's like a 401k and an investment. It compounds. It's like compound interest. A project, yeah, you can go take a loan out and go do projects, but you can't do that, correct me if I'm wrong, with water or sewer, because they're enterprise funds. They would have to be paid for through a rate increase. Same thing with stormwater. So from a project standpoint, it would only be general fund things, which would be parks and recreation, police and fire, and streets. So
Or facilities.
you could cull down your list probably if you're talking about taking out a debt, a loan for a general fund as what would fall under general fund. I am not in favor of a tax increase. I have seen too many things get accomplished in the last 4 years without having a tax increase, where we've lowered rates, we've done $4 million on paving in 4 years. As far as Martin Marietta goes, we've got $470,000 Part F grant, which would help us lay down infrastructure to then be able to go out and recruit some sponsorships for some different things. So I don't foresee a big upfront investment in that. And I am absolutely not in favor of increasing stormwater fee. If anything, you disband that, you put it back in the general fund, provide you flexibility. And on top of that, I am okay with discussing making solid waste whole. My concern with putting an enterprise fund is, again, you're restricting yourself, you're handcuffing yourself, and what you can do with that down the road.
Can we still raise the rates for trash without putting it in enterprise fund?
Yeah.
And what was the reasoning behind putting it in enterprise fund, just to show
I
the
think that
correlation?
if you put an enterprise fund, you could really yearly look at it absolutely as to the true cost that it would be a pass on to the consumer, the exact cost of it, which is properly bidded, which we got 4 years away from the new bid. So I think the original idea of the enterprise was that it would be a very transparent fund that would be paying for itself, that the city would not be getting in there doling out money for other things, and it would be a standalone fund that has to support itself
Mary,
with the service.
Mark, how much money is it gonna cost to do the 3 road projects? Do you know off the top of your head?
I know that Old Airport Road is 1.2, 1.3 million after the DOT payments. It's really a $2 million project, but we'll get 600 and some of that back. That expense probably would not be incurred until FY20 because we still have to do all the engineering work. Oaks Road, if I remember correctly, is about 800,000, and Trent Road's about 1.2 million.
And none of that money is encumbered
None of it's budgeted.
or budgeted.
So when we voted on it, we just voted to do it, not realizing, or we realized it was gonna be put towards another budget when that was done?
No, what you approved was setting up the project fund and doing the design services with the consultant. Ultimately, you're gonna have to do that. There's tons of utilities, there's widening, there's stormwater issues you're gonna have to deal with. That takes time to get a project started. And then ultimately, yes, there would be some capital expenses. And to your point, you talked about earlier about the federal government coming through with some infrastructure grants. I got an email the other day about Tiger grants. Tiger grants are used by Goldsboro to completely redo their downtown. They tied it, as long as it's tied to jobs and economic development benefit, that might be a perfect road. Trent Road may be the perfect road that we could potentially look to seek a Tiger grant for. Because we could tie that potentially to economic commercial growth through that corridor and lots of other things. It might be something we could look at. But it's important to have a shovel-ready project, as in the design's done, the plans are ready to go. Ultimately, you may pick some safety concern over a widening project, but when you're talking about economic benefit and commercial growth in a corridor, that may be of more concern to this board. So that's things we've got to hash out. But ultimately, you've got to have a plan.
I would just like to say I wouldn't want to approve this budget without, giving the city employees an increase. I'm strong about that, and I feel that, we need to discuss how that's done.
We do have raises built into the budget, but it's based on the quartile system.
And I know a few of us have an issue with how that's being done, and we wanted to discuss.
And we do as well.
Does staff have any other
Discuss it
questions
before we
or
approve
any
the budget.
needs for direction from the board as for the next meeting?
If you want to have another meeting, when you want to have it, we kind of hear what you're talking about. If there's any other things that need to be added to the parking lot list, what we're going to do is we're going to work on that. But ultimately, we're going to need the board to make some decisions about whether there's consensus built around certain projects and getting them done, or consensus around the revenue generation, so that we can say, okay, well, we'll prioritize projects, but that may not be your priority. So it's ultimately, it's kind of in the board's hands at this point.
Well,
I need a better understanding of this whole water sewer and what Alderman Odom was saying, that
We can't use general fund debt service.
okay.
to
Can you
pay.
borrow, but you can't borrow against the water and sewer fund? And you can't put taxes.
We can go out and get a wholesale loan for a big project. Let's call it $10 million, just for round numbers. Yes, we can go get a $10 million project, and $2 million of that is considered to be a water improvement project. We could do that, but the applicable share of the debt and the interest is going to be pulled out of the water fund to be able to pay for that,
Okay.
not the general fund.
Because I just want to see some infrastructure improvements so we can go ahead, like the road system we need to do, and get all of this behind us. We've got crumbling infrastructure in many of the older parts of our community.
The
and that's
main
what I wanna
issue that
fix.
we see, our water, electric, and sewer funds, as Jordan talked, we've got some very significant, $1.2 million, something like that, built into the budget for continuous improvements to the system. We are able to do that because we have a strong fund, stable fund. It has good days cash on hand. We've built that up, but we've set aside that for large capital projects here and there, whatever we've got to do. So we're incorporating that right now. The problem with the general fund is You know, we occasionally have a $750,000 Quint fire engine we've got to buy, and then you've got to go build this X facility over here, and then you've got to kind of pick and choose between 8 different departments whether or not you do this project or you do this project or do this project based on the revenue that our ad valorem and sales tax generation produces for us. So that's the tough part. The tough part is trying to figure out, okay, what's the priorities of the city based on the direction that we get from the board, and that's the problem we had, I guess, with when we move forward. We need direction from the board on what's your priorities with these projects and everything else.
For Trent Road, is there, because of the new construction and economic development, is there a time frame on that? Or like, based on the shopping center and everything that come in, did we say that, okay, because this infrastructure is being built, that we're gonna get this road done in a certain amount of time so that it's
Did not
an even flow?
We did not require any stipulations of the city to do any kind of additional project other than our agreement for the developer agreement. So in other words, we didn't put any stipulations that we had to widen the rest of Trent Road if you do and build this thing. So no, that's not built into it.
Okay.
But there is some portions where they widen the road on the section that they have, and we contributed some money towards that. Yes. But nothing past Glen Burnie. So they're doing from Glen Burnie to 17. From Glen Burnie down to Simmons Street, we have no commitment to have to do anything. However, like I said, it's important to have shovel-ready projects, especially for Tiger grants and stuff like that.
Okay.
The only
Well,
one
I'd like,
that's-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, real quick. The only one that's time limited is the agreement with DOT on Old Airport Road. If we don't do that improvement in, I think, 48 or 2 years,
2 years.
24.
24 months, we would have to return the $687,000 to DOT.
That one needs to be on the consent list.
Well, I think this board is committed for years now, at least a year and a half or so, of doing these 3 road projects. I mean, I don't know how we could not do these 3 road projects at this point in time. And I think that would certainly be on the list of bundling. Yeah.
I would say, Alderman Astor, that the old airport road is absolutely number 1 priority, because there is immediate infrastructure necessary to continue the economic development that's taking place out there, because it's growing enough to pay for the firemen that you need at that station.
Yeah.
Trent Road, as much as I would like to have it done, I'm struggling with the dollar amount from Simmons Street to Glen Burnie Road being the dollar amount that we just talked about. I don't know that there's that big of a benefit for that. The key with me and Trent Road was around Columbia Development, because we didn't need backup with all the residential that was taking place around there. I would actually probably say, I would be willing, it's mostly my ward, to say, put that Trent Road on the back burner and let's look for some grant opportunities for some economic development. It wouldn't upset me if that got taken off the list. Oaks Road, it's not my ward, but there's no economic development that's along that corridor. It is a bad road, it's in bad shape, but for us to spend the amount of money to go in there and widen it, I struggle with that one.
We've already widened
The
it.
widening's done, it's the resurfacing
Yeah.
what's left. That's what
Exactly.
I mean, it could be put on the same cycle. I mean, we just took ownership of that road 2 years ago. And it's one of the newest streets in the city of New Bern. We're going to make it a priority and bundle it and pave it.
I think it is necessary because of the water issue there down at that National Cemetery and going across that Jack Creek.
Well, that's already been
That's already
fixed.
I know that, but the way he's saying is, but that was a must, and that's a great improvement there. And I got a lot of my constituents talking to me about that and thanking me and the city for making those
Well,
improvements.
and National Avenue, now you're seeing National Avenue really needs help.
Exactly.
It really needs help there.
It
I think it's
does.
been neglected for years by the state. Now we've taken that on as well. So we need to look at that. But that's repaving. But again, if we could bundle it into something like this and just get it done and off of us, then it's done. I recognize about your thought process about the economic impact. But then again, it's a traveling way. People going down National Oaks Road to get to Glen Burnie and Hatteras and that area.
There's only 2 ways in there. National Avenue going down Oaks Road, north Glen Bern, they're coming down to Oaks Road. That's the only way you can get in, over into that area. So I think that area, the streets need to be resurfaced, repaved.
I would like, personally, I would like to see the updated survey that we just got back to determine, based off of some objective criteria, what roads they prioritize as need to be done. And that may very well be at the top of the list. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But if we're going to bundle some roads together, I think we need to use some objectivity.
You can say that real easily because your area is really a nice area, so you can say that. But me, with my area, I say there's improvement needs to be over there, and it should be done, and it's something that should have been done years ago.
Well, I agree with you, and that's why an objective study is going to show that my area is nice and I don't need any done. That's the reason I don't
Exactly.
have, Ward 6 has 0 paving going on this fiscal year.
Well, it's just that we've got the older neighborhoods. The older infrastructure is really what's in the downtown. Duffy Field, this area is the older infrastructure, and that's why we need to look at water, sewer, the flooding issues, things like that, that really need some attention.
What I would say in the next week or 2 or 3 is that each individual alderman needs to work very closely with the staff on what you want to see and what it's going to cost and the cost benefit of that improvement. And then also between individually talking with staff, I would say to the aldermen that you need to each and every one reach out to your fellow aldermen as to what you want to see and as to how you're going to get the support. I think we've all individually said where we stand. I personally do not want to see a tax increase, but at the same time, I think that the things that this board is talking about are well due, overdue, and I think that this board and the previous board have shown a lot of improvement, and I think the enthusiasm and investors coming to this city sense that this city is on the move. And I think that if we collectively respect and our reciprocity amongst the 7 of us, we can create a bundle of things to improve our city. I think the rest is coming. I think that the 12 firemen that are going to be needed in the western part are going to be funded just like, in 1950 there were maybe 35 police officers, and there's 87, 89 of them now. I know every time there was a need for an increase, it was a hardship on the board at that time to make those increases, but I do think that we're at a good time that if this board will move the city forward with a good budget, I think the rest will take care of itself. The Craven 30s or the, whatever will come.
Well, how does this board feel to give the city manager some direction about making the solid waste whole? And let's go ahead and get those numbers plugged in.
Do you want to show of hands? I'm okay with that.
You're basically saying that it standalone, pay for itself.
Not necessarily. I don't care
if they put it in enterprise or
that's
whatever.
JR.
Just let it pay for
But
itself.
I think it needs to be whole.
Well, go ahead. What do you want, show of hands?
Well, yeah,
on
that's
that?
fine. Just give him direction.
Does
on what-
everybody understand what your
Is raise
question
the,
was?
raise the trash rates,
Okay.
raise the,
I think-
right now it's 11.
You're presently subsidizing that amount, $260,000 a year. Is that correct?
280.
280.
So,
That's something to that effect. I mean, we can get that total number, but it's somewhere right around.
so you go ahead and ask. You want a show of hands of those that would support?
Yeah, let's go ahead and give him some direction.
I'm
You know,
in
him
favor
being
of
the
that.
city manager. Let's give him some direction. Not to say we're going to do it, but let's give him some direction as to let's make the solid waste whole, and that would give the city manager some idea as to what some of these parking lot items we can and cannot deal with.
Okay.
So that's only trash only?
Yeah,
now,
just
just
a
trash.
trash only.
This is just, we're going to take these individually, so to speak.
Yes.
Show of hands that want to do that.
And that was going from 11 to 14? $11 to
Yeah,
$14?
right now what's happening is the trash pickup's costing the city $280,000 more than what we're charging. So my point is let's at least make it so it will pay for itself, and we don't have to take $280,000 out of the general fund each year to pay for trash pickup.
So it's going from
That's a
11
form
to
of
14.
raising a rate,
$11
right?
to $14?
Somewhere in that range,
So you're basically only going up $2 and something?
what is it,
Per month.
JR?
I think it was something like
It's
that.
gonna be a couple different numbers in order to get, if you want to make it whole, meaning it's covering its share of shared services as well, then it would need to go up, and cover potential future, increases for the next 4 years, like the managers talked about. You're talking around 1475.
Well, we don't necessarily have to make it go up to project increases. If we get an increase, we can
If you're
raise it
gonna pull
again.
if you're gonna pull it out and put it as an enterprise fund. you
Well,
can-
I don't know, do we want to do that? I mean, I
I don't
don't,
really want to do that, but
I
We do,
don't-
we do know the increases for the next 3 years because they're in the contract.
They're in the contract.
built
We're
in the
gonna have them.
contract.
So essentially, you're.
okay, so it's going to 1475?
1475.
Yeah, but,
And so this is just to cover, for it to fund itself, and then the money that we were kicking out will go into general fund and be able to utilize that to.
correct.
Barbara, I don't know, yesterday they handed out a sheet, need to get it, that showed the trash rates from Moorhead, Havelock, those other places, and they were substantially higher than what we were. I don't know if you
I
got
got it. I think-
Yeah, I think she did. I remember seeing those taxes.
She's got it.
That's uniform.
It's the sideways chart that's gray and white.
No?
See that now? Right here it comes.
I don't know if it, that we need to be meeting individually. I think that takes more work and so many conversations. I don't understand why we just can't have another work session and just discuss it.
I was
open.
saying that to get ready for the next work session.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant.
Oh, no,
Okay.
No, I said you'd individually be prepared for the next work session.
Okay.
I said I would be willing to raise the garbage fee. I don't know, Alderman Bingham,
Yeah, I'm good.
Alderman Harris.
Sure, I mean, with $200,000 to do, what we gonna do that?
Well, we're gonna be able to fund, maybe that'll fund the extra firemen, you know what I'm saying? We need to-
280,000.
Yeah, go towards
What
that.
about raises for employees?
Well,
They're
we haven't
already
got there.
built into here. We just need to refine it because it's on the quartile system. But there are monies
We
already
need
in
to,
the
we
budget.
definitely need to talk about that.
Yes, absolutely. Parking lot.
We need to,
Alderman.
So
Harris.
raises were built in this, or was it the fact that we brought everybody up to par? So
And
we,
that was done this year.
Right.
Where we're at in this budget is we've proposed an increase that's relevant to the people who are currently in the position and where they meet in the quartile system if they were to get funded. Now, some of them may have not performed well, they may not get anything, which is, it would be some savings, but ultimately, based on the current employees we have, and we have built-in increases into these positions.
and what's the increase? Was it 2%?
I don't know the exact number because it depends on where people fall. If they're at the maximum or towards the top of the range, they only get 1%. For the people who are at the lower range, they get 2.5%, but obviously they're making a smaller salary. So it just depends on where the individual is as far as the employee.
but there's some ideas that I have that I would love to discuss at some point in time.
Based on the census of the staff, 460 some staff and members we have, my guess is we're probably somewhere around the 2% mark across the board, if I was to take a stab at it,
With the money that's currently in the budget.
with the money that's currently in the budget.
Okay. So you wouldn't have to add
Okay.
Somewhere between 2 to,
2.25.
something like that.
Okay. Did we finish with the hand?
Well, you were what?
I'm a yay.
Mr. Kinsey, were you in favor of
No, sir.
the garbage rate?
No, sir.
Alderman Best?
Well, looking at this chart here you just gave me, comparing New Bern to Havelock, and Havelock got a population of 20,000, we got a population of 30,000, and they're charging $16, and we're charging 11. Yeah, I'll say yes.
Alderman Odom?
At this point, no, because I'd like to know what the additional revenue would go toward.
Okay. All right, what's the next item of anything that
Will
you?
that pass?
It's giving him direction. I think we had a majority of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the problem. I mean, I don't feel like we're gonna get anywhere. I mean, are we scared to have a conversation on what we need to get done?
No,
I
I'm
mean,
ready to have a
let's set the
conversation.
date
I'm also ready to ask the city manager in that same parking lot, just pull out the 6 firemen and show me what the impact's gonna be with the 6 firemen. And take in consideration the retirees that are getting ready to happen in the fire department.
And I would say before we do that, we need to look at them, the police, for them employees, the ones that are being,
The telecommunications.
telecommunicators, because you gotta get the call first before you can send the firemen.
Sure.
And if
You know, I
they're
asked for
burnt out and-
justification on that. Is there no justification? I mean, I didn't get, is that the only justification?
I wrote down that you asked for the telecommunicator justification.
Right, is that the only justification the police department
That's
provided?
what
They
they
didn't
submitted.
provide any narrative or anything?
That's what they submitted.
Mark, quick question. Let's say someone is up for retirement and they have 30 days left and they have a lot of sick time, sick leave. Could you give that to them and they can go ahead on home?
Most of the time, and
How did that work?
I'm just gonna give you a scenario, okay? Most of the time as an employee is considering retirement, the retirement system will do an analysis of where they stand based on their years of service and how much annual leave and sick leave they've built up, okay? This is usually about a year out normally, or maybe more, because that number can calculate to reduce the amount of years of service that they have to perform. So I guess what I'm saying is if an employee works for 28 years and they've got 2 years worth of sick time and vacation time built up, they can utilize that towards their service time to meet the requirements of the 30-year retirement. Okay? So most employees will use their sick time towards that. Some employees will use their vacation time. Others like to take that as a payout in the end. But that's generally how it works. So it's kind of difficult to say at the 30-day point. I very seriously doubt any of them will be using any of their sick time because it's already been calculated and built into them getting to leave earlier than having to work the whole 30 years.
Okay.
Mr. Stevens, but because that's built into, a person could have military time or other things that count as retirement. The city board doesn't have much policy ability as far as changing what you just said. In other words, because you've got so many different systems built into that reciprocate with each other. Is that right?
The only way you could do that is to eliminate employee benefits towards their accrual time. And then I don't know, there's probably some federal laws about allowing leave time for
Well,
employees.
That's a big question, because if somebody had so many days in Havelock, and then they worked in Moorhead, and then they worked in Kinston, and then they came to New Bern, I mean, that's an
Well,
individual PR.
That's a little bit
HR.
different. You're talking about where, well, in the 30-year world, yes, when it comes to the health insurance benefits, there's only two scenarios, or 3 scenarios with the city, so there's a lot of different avenues
Right.
when you're talking about, but it's
Each
health
one
insurance
has a
is different.
case,
Yeah.
you know.
It's complicated.
individual case.
That's the reason why normally it takes several months for the state to get back with you. Alderman Astor and Alderman Best, both of y'all have been through the retirement before, so y'all know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, now, is the board ready to talk about a date for the next workshop?
Well, there's some other questions that need to be answered, and then, there's several of the board members here, including myself, that would like to see how best to utilize the funds that are set aside for employee raises. I'm strictly against, and I even think management is, I mean, staff is too, I'm strictly against the way it's being done today. I know I've had several conversations with some of the board members, and we all agree that we don't think it's fair. So I would like to see about, if you want it to be merit-based, it can be merit-based, or if you want it to be a salary adjustment, it can be a salary adjustment. But I'm all in favor of trying to do something to give some of our employees more than 1% a year for the past 3 years, with 0 on the 4th year. I mean, I think it's time that we look at doing something. I'd love to go at 2.5%, but if it's going to take 2% to do it, I know Jeff and I have had some conversation as to how it's handled in his world and how it's handled in my world. But if it's merit based, then let's give the department head the opportunity to do a 2.5% down to 0%. 2.5 for the ones that deserve it, and 0 for the ones that don't deserve it. Or let's just give let's make a salary adjustment for this year, gives the city manager and the assistant city manager time to revamp the evaluation system and come back with the evaluation system next year in a different form than what it is today.
Yeah, I can agree with that. If it's gonna take more than the time that we have to approve this budget, that we do what we call a COLA across the board raise, and then come back and reevaluate how we do it in the next budget. Because at the end of the day, I've been in the corporate world, I don't know how long it's been since everybody else actually had to clock in from 8 to 5, and I worked my hardest, and I was one of the top, and all they could do was 1%, or and that was in the private sector. So if we have funds, or we're sitting good, we're a city, and these individuals are the backbone of operating the city. We need to be able to give them some money because they have kids and families, and we need to give raises. And there's some people that go in every day and they do their job, and to them that is their best. And if they weren't doing their job, then they should be fired. But if they're doing their best, they're still here, they deserve to get a raise. And I mean, I'm fighting for that. I think if we don't have an idea on how the quartile system's going to work, then we need to go ahead and across the board this time take the sacrifice up in this budget and find the money to be able to across the board give raises outside of what was already adjusted, because people need to live. Rates are going up, everything goes up, and these people are still struggling to live.
I have no problem with that. The only problem I have, when you give an across the board, why should somebody at the upper end, what happens is, somebody making $100,000 is gonna get a big boost, and you got somebody who's making $30,000 that gets $100 or $200. So to me, that is almost
But
unfair.
the way it's been working is the employees that are our senior employees have been getting 1%. So you take a $75,000 employee, he gets a $750 a year raise. I mean, what's he going to do with $750 in a year? You take a $75,000 employee that's been here for 1 year, and he gets what, $1,800 a year raise.
Because he
How's
gets
that
a
fair?
2.5%.
Because he's getting 2.5%.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think just an across the board is fair. I think we're going to have to be a little more measured, because I want to make sure the people on the lower end could potentially need more help or need more adjustment than at the higher end.
Okay,
I don't know how you work that, but
are we able to be creative and say, the levels of what we do? 2% go to the higher up, and 1% go
to the higher up.
1% to the higher up.
Well,
and
let's
2%?
just if we do it on the merit-based system, and we give the guidance to the city manager that we have $410,000, and he can give to the employees like the one that Jordan we're talking about today, the 2.5% increases, and the ones that when you ride by you see them leaning on the shovel instead of holding the shovel in their hand, could qualify for maybe a 1% based on the department head's evaluation. But let's don't penalize them just because of their longevity. Now, would you agree to a system like that, Mr. Odom?
Absolutely.
I don't care how many years they are,
So-
it's the amount.
Yeah, I
that
agree
I'm
to a system
concerned
like
about.
that. Bobby, I agree to a system like that as well, but you made a statement before that, if the employee's not performing, get zero. I don't think any employee should get zero because number one, if they come to work and they're doing their job, it may not be their job may not be as important to the other employee's job, and they may not be exceeding like the other employee. So if that's the case, then why is that employee still sitting in that slot? You should fire him.
Well,
Well,
if you get zero, that's what you should do.
But the
No,
thing
no,
is,
then if you're not
that's why
doing your
there
job,
should be
you
class.
shouldn't
I
get
agree.
this.
I agree with you.
You know, you should
If his evaluation shows that he gets zero raise, he needs to be put on
Exactly,
probation,
exactly.
and
So I feel
something
that
happen real
each-
soon. Now,
each
what
employee
I
needs to
think
raise.
what you're going to see is a trend of some 2.5% increases and some 2% increases, and to the very few employees, because our employees work hard, but the very few employees that are falling behind and need to be, there might be some 1% raises in there for them.
Right.
Yeah, but
But not
what's the
zeros.
difference? What's the difference in those two people that he was talking about that saved the city $150,000, and one of them may be a 20-year employee and gets a 1% raise. One of them may be a 2-year employee and gets a 2% raise, and they're making the same salary. They're making the same salary to begin
Jeff
with.
said there should be an incentive program because it wouldn't have been necessarily raised. They would have made
Well, that's
10%
another
off
topic. I
of
agree
them.
with that as well.
I think we have to look at
That's
that holistically.
completely comes out of the corporate world. I think it's a great idea.
Let me tell you about the other side of the fence, where I don't think people understand sometimes. When you have a job making $30,000 a year, nobody looks at the benefits. And when we talk about life insurance, health insurance, if you had to go out and pay that cost, that is a significant cost. So really, when you tell somebody they're making 30, they're really making potentially 40 or 45 because of their benefits.
Well,
But
then give
because
them the
it's
raise
not-
based on their 45,000.
Well, that's what I'm saying, basically, because the money's not in their pocket, they don't see that.
Would that
If they-
apply? Would that
I'd
apply to
rather-
this? I'm just saying, you, Mark. That applies to the city manager as well. So if he's making $200,000, his benefits is putting him up there to
Correct,
Yeah.
absolutely, but I'm just saying
Exactly.
that's
Well,
the
then,
whole.
have
Right,
you looked
exactly.
at what happens in corporate world? I'd rather take more money in my salary and then have to figure out my health insurance, and I make the choice whether I'm gonna go online and look for affordable health care than for us to be funding it, because have we discussed that?
And you wouldn't
Give me
have
my
any new
money
employees.
Because I'll budget my money on what I need to do, because some people feel they don't need insurance, but you have to take it.
Until they get sick. Or
But
they
yeah,
get
I mean,
fired.
and you wouldn't have any new employees. You would never be able to hire another policeman in a fireman without health
But right
insurance.
now, health insurance is free. I mean, if we gave some
For the
costs,
employee.
for the
Nothing
employee.
That's a different subject. I
Well,
agree, but that's a
it-
different subject.
Like right now, I have the city insurance. I don't pay, but the city does. But if you were to charge me $50, $30, $45, $75 out of my pay every time I get a stipend, I would pay that because it's a necessity. There's some things that you have to pay. And then there's an increase, not me, I'm saying hypothetically increase as an employee. Give me my money and let me allocate it the way that I need to, and we will figure it out. I mean,
So-
But you can do
So
that
you're
for
gonna
one.
give them a 1% increase in salary and then
I
charge
didn't
them
say,
an
no, I
extra
didn't say
$50 a pay
No,
period
I
on
didn't say
insurance?
1%. It needs to be a decent amount of money that individuals are making. And
Okay.
I think Alderman Odom had comments.
If I could, Mr. Manager, could you just clarify for us, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Jamie, I think what you're saying is you think people at the lower end of the scale, they're struggling, they deserve the right and the ability to make more money.
Yes.
Bobby, I think what you're saying is with the quartile system, the people that are making more money are getting penalized. They're not getting as much money because they happen to be at the top of the scale. You both want the employees to make more money, but you want more at the bottom end, and you want the guys at the top end not to be penalized. Am I right? And we'll hold that thought, because this is what I wanted Mark to clarify. That I think there's this misconception that there hasn't been raises for employees in the last 4 years, and I'd like for you to kind of clarify that some employees may have gotten a small amount, but there could be some employees that got a very healthy amount. Correct?
This is the fifth budget I believe I've done as manager. and there was only 1 year that we had no increase. Every year has, two of the years were merit-based increases. One of them was a COLA, and this one is proposed with a merit-based increase.
Well, then a couple of those $700 or $500 is not doing nothing. I mean, we evaluated.
I'd take it.
Huh?
I mean, I would.
Well, you make a lot of money, Mark.
No,
so-
I'm just, it's not about what I make, it's about, I'm getting more than I'm making now, but I get what everybody's saying, so let me tell you.
To me, I don't hear from the employees
Right.
about it being the amount of money. I hear about the employees saying, if you have a power outage, or I'm the one they call because I know the system and the other ones don't. Or if you have a snowstorm, I'm the one they call and the other ones are sitting home because I'm the 20-year, 25-year employee, and he gets a $700 a year raise, which can't even buy him
That's not even a mortgage payment.
So,
a year raise. Yeah, I mean not a month, a year.
so do we trust our department heads to make the decision on rating their employees fairly and accurately?
I have all the faith in the world in our department heads that they can do that, and if we just change the system and giving them the option and do away with the quartile and give them the option to do what they have to do.
So can we give direction today and move forward that the amount of money that's in the budget is adequate? Let the city manager figure out what those percentages would be, but offer those, continue to offer those this year under a merit-based system without the quartiles involved.
So it'd be based on the department heads evaluating each individual
Yes,
employee, and
we
so
And then awarding them the amount of money.
now Mark would figure out how much each department will get based on that. Is that what you're saying?
I talked to Mark about this, and he's got a great idea. He said what he would like to do is, after all the evaluations are in, and they're kind of graded, if everybody can get a 2.5% because we got enough money for everybody to get 2.5%, that's what had happened. But if some of the employees that are grading low, Mark,
I can tell you right now, if I have a
Get
department
it
head
in.
that submits me evaluations from his entire department and every one of them's 2.5% recommended increases, I'm gonna have a problem with that because I very seriously doubt that there's
That's
rock,
not
every
fair.
single one of their employees is rock stars.
but do you understand what I'm saying about the two employees that he has? I mean, that's almost a shame. If one of them's a 20-year guy and one of them's a 1-year guy, and the 20-year guy gets a 1% and the 1-year guy gets a 2.5%.
Part of our current process, the department head can actually request of the city manager that they be approved for the full 2.5% regardless of where they are in the quartile. So in those instances, that would easily be something that Jordan could use to justify asking Mark to approve 2.5% regardless of where they were in the quartile.
How much?
And any department head can do that.
I think what is, our plan, Chrissy and I have discussed this, a month or two ago, honestly, after going through this process and how, I've never been a huge fan of the quartile-based system anyways. I think that it should be merit-based, and those who are performing should be compensated accordingly. So we had discussed some possibilities, and actually had some discussion at the department head level as well during one of our meetings about this coming up in the future and us evaluating that. Now, our personnel ordinance basically says that we will do merit-based increases based on performance rating. That's one way or promotions or whatever it may be. It will be based on one's evaluation and performance. It doesn't necessarily tie it to specifically the quartile system, so the board can choose to direct me how they want me to apply. You can say, hey, like Alderman Odom just said, you've got the money in the budget now, it's X amount of money. We want you to use that towards the raises and distribute that to the department heads based on the employee. I'll figure it out, but ultimately it's based on performance. And I'll work with department heads, and if we need to report back, we can, but ultimately, I think it's the board's decision on how you want me to act. But ultimately, I think our plan is to come back with a recommendation on a change to how employees are evaluated.
I think that's a great idea. I need for you to be able to give our employees that are doing an outstanding job a decent raise this year, and at 2.5% raise. The ones that aren't doing a job, some don't get anything, and they need to be put on probation. The ones that are mediocre, the ones that are doing a mediocre job might get a 1.5% increase. Yeah.
But I agree with what Alderwoman Beth said. I mean, there's positions where it may not be important to someone else, but they come in and they do their job, and who are we or whoever to say that they don't deserve 2 point whatever the percent is. I mean, that's hypothetically, that's like, Mark, if you came in every day and did your job and we didn't give you a bonus or a raise, you're going to come back next year and be the same, energetic that you are to move the city forward. No, it's a more, people, it's something that you have to
What do you
do.
want to do? What do you recommend?
I'm just saying realistically, like he said, if the department head came back and said all of them deserve a raise, he would reject it hypothetically. I mean, that's what should come back. I mean,
Because I look at it from this perspective. If you are a department head or supervisor and you have employees in your department that's been there 3, 4, 5 years and they haven't received a raise, okay, and you're saying that they're not performing, so why are the employees still there? Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. That should be put on the back of the supervisor, the department head, for not evaluating that employee correctly and
JR, if we gave every employee in the city of New Bern a 2.5% increase in salary, how much money are we talking about?
$504,111.
504?
504, yes, sir.
So what did we
That's,
increase,
I
what did
think
we
it's huge.
increase the salaries to? Because you have an increase of salaries in every budget line.
Yeah, I'm sorry, say it again.
So you've put an increase.
The delta is what you're looking for, of
Yes,
what we
what's
have
the-
in the budget versus
correct.
2.5 across the board. That's
No,
about,
yeah, the
it's about
500
it's
minus
about
what you've already
$100,000.
got in there now.
It's about
That was gonna be my
100,000
next question.
salaries. Now you got to incorporate the fringe benefits on top of that, which is what,
About 20%.
20%, so 1.2, so that's the 120 grand.
20K.
So you
That's
have
what the
around
difference is,
$400,000.
$120,000.
That's the delta difference
So
between.
we'd only have to put another 120,000 into the budget to.
Well, and that's assuming, like I said, that every employee in the city, all 460 of them, are rock stars.
Yeah.
well,
And I just,
I'm not saying give every employee 2.5%. I'm saying that each employee should receive something.
exactly. I mean,
That's my thing.
And I
Everyone
know
cannot
like you
receive
said, previous
2.5
boards-
because everyone has not
That
exceeded.
hasn't happened, I don't think any time that hasn't happened. They've all received something, because if they receive zero, they're getting ready to be fired. Now, the only time you could receive zero, and I've got ideas about that, is if you're at the very top of your pay scale. If there's nowhere else for you to go, then you should receive a one-time annual bonus or something like
and
that.
that, we do that.
No, I know there's been employees that has not received raises and they did not get fired.
I've
They
got
receive-
a
Like I
list,
said, that's
I
what
got a
I'm saying.
list
That's
from
on the back of
HR.
the supervisor.
I got a list from HR, and HR, I don't remember anybody on that list that didn't receive at least a 1% raise.
well,
How
at
far
the
have
end
you
of the
gone
day,
back?
it sounds
Well, I
like,
asked her for it last year.
this is
Oh,
very
there you go.
important. Maybe we can be creative as a city and come up with some, incentive programs like what Alderman Jeff said, and maybe some bonuses or something for, where they work hard or whatever, but, take that corporate lifestyle of raises and getting money and maybe put that into the city sector, because at the end of the day, cost of living is still going up, and if we're not giving a standard cost of living, look what happened. We had to do a budget amendment to get everybody
Sweetie,
to
let me tell you
raise
something. You
up.
keep
Hold on.
talking about the corporate world. You keep talking, but let me tell you what happens in the corporate
Listen,
world.
I understand.
What
both
happens
a-
is you got to meet the bottom line, and if you don't, You fire, you
Right,
get rid
but
of
right
those
now,
people.
when people watch, they hear that we're sitting with a great fund balance. So we don't give enough money across the board to these employees, but we're sitting with a whole bunch of money. But we want to go do a project over here. At the end of the day, we're not going to be able to do a lot of stuff if we don't have these employees digging out the ditches, mowing the lawn, taking care of stuff. So you have to make sure you take care of your foundation so that you can grow, because we will crumble if people start to leave because they're not getting their.
So what do you recommend, really, I'm seriously, what do you recommend and what do you think would be fair for the employees?
What
Everybody-
I just said, I like what he said in the mayor, that we're gonna leave it on for the department heads, but if the department heads come back and say everyone deserves a raise, I mean, honestly,
No.
personally.
He said everyone deserves a 2.5% raise.
I didn't say that.
Is that right?
No, I didn't say
No,
that.
not say that.
No.
You meant everybody not every, you
I'll
think we
have a
got-
problem if everybody comes back at 2.5%, because I'll guarantee you that there's not 460 employees.
Mark,
I think
what's the
That's
current
not what I think we're agreeing, but we're just not understanding each other. You would have a problem if everybody came back for a 2.5% increase.
absolutely.
You wouldn't have a problem if 15 employees needed a 2.5% and the rest of the staff got 1%. I mean, would you? I mean,
If
if
it's deserved of such, then I would, and it's justified appropriately to me, then yes, I could support that. But
okay,
So how do you evaluate an employee? I'm just gonna say that it's out there cleaning out the ditches. He's out there every day cleaning out the ditches, and he's doing his job. So what are you looking extra from that employee for him
And
to
that's
excel?
what I want to
To
bring back
excel.
to the board, but I want to say, okay, to be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of the way the current system is with regards to the evaluation. There's 3 different criteria. You either meet, you're below, or you're above standards. I think there's got to be some kind of graded thing to where, you evaluate people and it comes to some kind of scoring system, and that's what we want to discuss on how we do that. And then I think you base the increases based on the score, not necessarily. I don't agree with the way it used to be. Whenever a long time ago, with the way it was, if you met 5 on, if you were a 5 or greater, you got X amount on the merit thing. I think if somebody's a 5, if you go to a 1 through 5 system, I think if you got a 5, somebody deserves more. I think if you got somebody that's a 3, they're doing their job, they're coming in, they're clocking in, and they're just doing their daily work. I think they deserve less, but they probably do need some kind of increase. If you're a 1, I think you deserve nothing. I think you're put on probation, and you probably deserve, my opinion.
Because I wasn't done, and Ms. Sabrina interrupt me. What I wanted to say is, this board had to do an adjustment for being evaluated. How long from the last time we were evaluated till this time? What was the years? Was it a year, a couple years? We were evaluated and everybody ended up getting an increase? How many years was it?
we do it anyway.
We do it annually.
So annually, we get evaluated, and if we're not at the minimum, we have to be brought up to par, you're saying? Where you evaluate?
She's talking about compression.
The salary study, 5 years probably.
Right, so there we go. That's seemingly to me a problem, that it's done every 5 years. If, you know what I'm saying, that was a big increase right there, but if we're doing it and moving it up.
The market changes.
Right.
The market changes.
So you don't think the market change every year?
Well, it does, but it's a lot more difficult. The only way you adjust for that technically is to figure what the growth is over a large spectrum of time. It's like stock markets. You can kind of
Right.
project what the growth's going to be over a period of time, and then you try to project out what that CPI or whatever it is, and build that in as a base rate. And then if you got super performers, they get something on top of that. That's a way you could potentially look at that, where you have a base raise plus super performer raise or whatever, but it's merit based. But that's essentially what you're doing is a COLA with merit is what you're doing there.
I agree with Jeff. Good night.
Alderman, did you have something down there?
No, sir.
Okay. I think what's gonna happen is, at this meeting, we're gonna go through the parking lot, and there's gonna be some winners and losers, and we're probably gonna vote on these individual items to finish up a budget, and then there's gonna be a a vote on it, and it's probably not gonna be unanimous, but that's the way it'll be, and I hope it is unanimous, and I hope we can all be unanimous on the
I
park
think the
lines.
onus now is on the
But-
city manager and assistant city manager. I think you've heard enough today that you can come back and at least give us a couple of suggestions for this pay. I think you've heard enough back and
I
forth
think that's
now.
the pay, I mean, I can figure that out.
Because I think that's the hardest thing we're dealing with right now, but.
Do we know of any other items that are in the general fund that are big ticket items that could be so-called bundled? Is there any, Mark, do you know anything off the top of your head that's a general fund item that could be bundled?
So we had,
Yeah, we can take it out to save money, yeah.
yeah, the fire station was one if we were gonna.
Well, I don't think we're looking at the fire station right now.
Old Airport, Trent Road, Oaks Road, and I'm just trying to go, I'm gonna go through real quick the parking lot that we've kind of captured, okay? Firemen, additional firemen, one animal control officer added, 3 telecommunicators added. There was some discussion about the stormwater fee. There was discussion of the community center. There was discussion about Old Airport Road, Trent Road, Oaks Road, and cemetery preservation. I think that is pretty much kind of capturing all of the,
Well, just
and now the employee issue.
Just for the record, I would like, if you're going to, instead of hiring 3 telecommunicators, I'd like to hire 3 telephone operators that can take those administrative calls off of them. I think the 3 telecommunicators can do their job if they didn't have to worry about, is the chief of police here today, you know, those type of calls. But we need to talk to the chief about that. But I mean, I think it certainly would be a lower grade and probably not as for someone just to field telephone calls versus a telecommunicator, right?
Right.
I mean,
I think what,
those are general fund projects.
I don't know,
Yeah,
I think
but you understand what I'm saying?
essentially
He's
what
talking
you're saying is. if you call
190,000 calls and only and 2/3 of them are admin calls. You know, if you can hire somebody to sit at that desk and take those admin calls, at least, you know, versus hiring an additional
Yeah, we
telecommunicator.
can look at that, but ultimately, it's still a body, and it's still.
It is.
Right.
Might not be as much money though.
Right,
Just to throw out there, because we've been having meetings about it, you know, another bundle could be the fact of the situation that's going on with the Boys and Girls Club and looking into expanding West New Bern and possibly selling Stanley White. So, I mean, that's something that if we take money out, that's part of it, because, you know, that is detrimental to the community, and, you know, that's the vision that we're looking at. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff at the table that we need.
So when are we gonna meet again?
Exactly. What's the date?
Mr. Leader?
I could do the week of the
Let's doodle
14th.
this thing.
Let's doodle this thing.
I can
As
do
far
the
as
week
the
of the
date.
14th.
What was that, 14?
Yeah, it was May 14th,
Yeah.
Monday, May 14th, I can do that too.
me too.
I'll tell you in a minute as soon as I figure out
We
this
want
new
another
fund.
1 to 5 deal, want to come back? in
Sounds
here?
like we need to come up in here like 9 o'clock in the morning.
I'm good with the 14th.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
good with the 14th. Give you enough time to, do you think?
1 o'clock?
Well, let's see if Jeff can do it.
One's fine. I agree, 1.
1,
You able to work that out, Mr. Odom?
Yeah, I can do it. I
okay.
have to cancel 3
Okay.
conference calls, but I can do it.
You say cancel what?
I have to cancel 3 conference calls, but I can do it.
You sure?
What else needs to
15th.
come for
15th 's
this
wide
workshop today?
We could do the
Okay, so we have agreed, though, to cancel the public hearing. That, you've got that, right, for Tuesday night?
What? I mean, we just do that at the meeting, can't we?
Well,
Yeah, we don't want to advertise it
Yeah, I
when
know, you
people
won't
come.
be able to get it out there.
It's already been advertised.
Why do you send it out so early? I don't get it.
We're
for the
required to by
public's
law.
benefit, and for y'all.
You're
Just put it
required
on
to,
page 10.
what?
We're required to advertise the public hearing for the budget by law no less than 10 days prior to the public hearing taking place. Since the public hearing was called for at the last board meeting, we advertised it this past Friday, so that way we met the legal requirements.
10 day.
The public hearing guidelines do not align statutorily with our requirements for a formal meeting. as far as the notice.
So no city Facebook.
So should we recess this meeting until then?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Can we
The
recess?
public hearing can be opened and recessed, and you
Yes.
could even tell the public ahead of time that you plan to do that.
Yeah.
That eliminates having to advertise 10 days
That's right.
before a new hearing.
So what you could do, in theory, what the clerk is saying is, at the next board meeting, you could open up the public hearing, you could hear initial comments, take those comments.
Let them know that we're not ready.
Let them know
It's not
that
the final
We're
budget.
going to, before we open this, we're going to recess at this public hearing and continue it on March the 22nd meeting. I think, is that right? The 22nd?
Yes.
Yes.
May 22nd. The May 22nd meeting. And at that point, you can continue the public hearing for anybody that has any additional comments.
I think
Wonderful.
that's great, but what I'm saying, what I think she's trying to say is people are gonna come here, and if we open it, are we, you know,
Let 'em-
there's
let 'em
gonna be a
provide
line of people wanting to speak, we're gonna hear their comments and then continue it. We don't want them to come and say anything that's gonna keep the meeting.
Well, I guess we can listen to them. I mean, we've,
It might inform you as to making a decision on how you want to add something to the budget,
Okay,
Or take something out?
or take something out.
okay, can we do the 15th instead of the 14th, because
Oh, Lord.
they, them down there, I can do the
oh, you
15th,
can't do 14?
15th is good for me.
15, Tuesday the
So
15th?
May-
Okay.
May 15th, that's my anniversary, so I'd like to be in and out, okay?
You want to start at 7 o'clock?
Yeah, 7 in the morning, sounds good to me. Let me drop the kids off.
I got a conflict on the 15th.
Yeah, we can go back to the 14th, that's fine.
You
What
sure?
about
Yeah.
16th?
It's my
Are you
conference
good,
call, I can
Barbara, for
cancel
the
it.
14th?
I'm fine with 14th or 15th.
Yeah, I'm good on the 14th.
So we still at 1 o'clock?
14th
Yes,
at 1
please.
o'clock.
Sure.
Okay.
On the
Need a
14th.
motion. Need a motion.
I make a motion that we,
Do we recess this one till then, or is it a new
that we
meeting?
have an additional
You can
work
call a
session.
new one or recess this one since it's,
Okay, let's just call a new workshop.
A new, a
Do you
work
have to
session.
advertise?
Well, hold on, if you don't mind. If you want to call a new one, I kind of need to know how we want to put the agenda.
So then
Otherwise,
let's
it could
just
be a
reset.
recess
Okay.
this until.
Let's just
the 22nd.
recess
So
this?
Let's
make that
recess.
Are you
motion
okay
to
with just
recess.
recess this meeting until?
I don't know, it's just.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, y'all
What's your
do
thought
what
process, Jeff?
I'd rather have a new meeting, let's advertise it, say we're gonna go through a laundry list of
Okay.
things that we're taking
Okay.
away from these meetings for us to discuss what we wanna
Then-
include in the budget.
Okay,
Then I'll make that motion.
All right.
Brenda?
second.
Motion second, any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Motion second, any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Meeting is adjourned.